This video will be a commentated speedrun of Octopath Traveler 2's All Extra Battles category. Since the last time I did this, there's been significant changes to the route, so it's definitely still worth a watch if you've watched the first one. If by chance you haven't heard of the game before, it's a JRPG with 8 protagonists that each have their own story. The game's a sequel to the original Octopath Traveler, and is basically an improvement in every way. For the All Extra Battles category, the goal of the run is to fully complete the Extra Battles mode by clearing the 4 bosses within it. The mode is added into the game about a year after launch, and the 4 fights are extremely difficult, especially the last 2. To unlock the mode, I need to fully complete the main story, including all 8 character stories and the final boss. To begin, we're going to pick Throne as our starting character, and we'll immediately get thrown into a battle. So I'm going to quickly explain the battle system. So it's a somewhat standard kind of Final Fantasy-esque battle system, but there's 2 main mechanics, breaking and boosting. So right here I'm going to hit enemies for their weaknesses, which will reduce their shield points, and if that reduces to 0, they'll break. While broken, they take double damage from all sources, regardless if they're weak to them or not. So throughout the run, I'm going to basically want to be breaking enemies, and then using my strongest attacks, basically. So another use of breaking will be shown in this battle here. So I break the enemies, and then if every enemy is unable to act, such as if you break them, since breaking them removes their actions from the turn, you will be able to run away if all enemies are unable to act. So I use that to run away from that battle all the time. So now we're going to get into another battle. This one's going to be a little more complicated, and I'm going to explain boosting. So if you're going to look at the top right, next to each character, I have those orange orbs, and every turn you get one. You didn't use one on the previous turn. And what you basically do is you can spend up to 3 of them at once to pop up your skills. So I'm going to use that here to deal more damage, hit more times. Whether you deal more damage or hit more times depends on what you're actually boosting. So after this, we're just kind of going to do some basic story, so I guess I'll just kind of explain some other kind of basic things about the run. So another mechanic of this game is path actions. Each character will have 2 of these. One that they can do during the day and one during the night. And what a path action basically is, if you haven't played, is basically it's a way each character basically has a unique method of interacting with NPCs. So Throne's case, she is a thief, so her first path action that we're going to see in this run is steal, which lets her steal items from NPCs. And her other one, so that's what she can do during the day, and then at night she can ambush, which is basically knocking out NPCs. So this is the tutorial for stealing, and I'm going to immediately go and steal a story item. But obviously, progressing in the story isn't the only use of stealing items, so I'm going to do that immediately. So there's a few NPCs in this town that have items called soul stones, and I'm going to be stealing a few of them. Also, I talked to that character for literally no reason, just to miss input. But basically, I'm going to go and steal some soul stones. Soul stones are basically this game's damage consumable. So you basically use them in battle, they'll do elemental damage. The type of elemental damage depends on, of course, what soul stone you have. There's also different sizes of soul stones, but right now we just have the small ones. And now we're going into here, and and this is the tutorial for Throne's other path action, which is ambush. Ambush lets you, at night, knock NPCs out. She needs to be a correct level to do this, but every time you do it in the story, at least in this run, you will be able to obviously. So,
my turn.
The next thing, so I break the enemy to run away, and the other thing is it introduces Throne's passive. Every character in this game has like a passive ability. They're called talents, and Throne's basically gives you an attack and speed buff, elemental attack and speed buff at the beginning of the battle. So this is the first boss, and I'm going to use those buffs that I just got to deal damage with my spell. That was no idea how I screwed around with my damage. But basically, I boost the spell to deal more damage. Then I'm going to break the boss. I'm going to start throwing soul stones at him. Soul stones do small soul stones do 200 fixed damage. So if broken, it's 400 damage, which is very good. So if I get good turn order here, I don't need to heal, but I had to heal. It's a little unfortunate, however. So I'm gonna throw my soul stones, break the boss, throw more soul stones, and that's our very first boss. Whoa. Now that's our very first boss. I lost a fair bit of time here because I fumbled around in the menus, I got a slow-ish fight, and just wasn't the cleanest play all around. I also got an extra encounter at the beginning, so whatever. So now we're gonna actually start exploring. So the initial exploration stage of the run, I'll kind of just go into what our kind of goals are. So our goals for this stage of the run is basically we want to get access to the evasive maneuvers support skill as soon as possible. Support skills are basically a mechanic where you can, as you learn skills in a character's job, or if you learn skills in a job, you'll get equipable kind of passives that you can have up to 4 on at once. Evasive maneuvers is a passive that reduces the amount of random encounters you get. And as I explained this, I'm throwing these kind of around. I'm basically exploring areas. Like I went into that area there because it's a fast travel point for later. So I'm going to be kind of exploring to find fast travel points. But basically, I'm doing a combination of walking and running. When you walk, you don't get it. You obviously move slower, but you don't get nearly as many encounters. So I'm going to walk here. But back to evasive maneuvers. So evasive maneuvers is a support skill that makes you get less random encounters, which in a speedrun is really good because random encounters are slow. So this is a scholar support skill. So we're gonna go and pick up Oswald, who is a scholar, and that's one of the reasons why Throne is actually picked as a starting character. She's pretty close to Oswald, and just in a good location. As for why we don't start with Oswald, it's simply because Oswald's first chapter is really slow. But now, immediately once we get Oswald, we're going to use one of his path actions, which his knight path action is Mug. And basically, he can beat people up, and if he beats someone up successfully, he can steal their items. So, I'm going to use Ice Wind on this guy to break him, and boost a Fireball to kill him. Technically speaking, you don't always get that kill, but most of the I think probably about 95% of the time you'll get that kill, which is good. If I don't get the kill, I can just whack it with my staff and that'll kill him. So now, I just got a bunch of money from both that guy and the chest I picked up, and I'm gonna be going to the black market. So the black market is this screen here, and every time you switch it to night, and back you get a new set of, it's a new set of NPC vendors you can buy things from. There's 4 different configurations you can get, and I'm looking for clerics. So I think I get this pretty quickly. There we go, there's the clerics. I think it's about like a 15% chance for the clerics, remember correctly. So basically I sell the money items I get, and I'm going to buy some more soul stones. And these will be used to basically grind XP and JP. Mainly JP. So JP is short for job points, and that's going to be how I'm going to learn skills for my jobs. So that's how I'm going to unlock evasive maneuvers. So this way, so now I'm going to be taking a ferry, which lets you get to new continents. And basically, I'm going to be walking, or running all the way to a town called Triple. The town, we're going to have to visit basically every town. Well, not basically, literally every town. We're going to have to visit basically every town in the run, but going here is nice because the areas here have pretty good enemies to kill for JP. So the thing that I want to see here is to get surprised by the enemy, so I didn't get surprised by the enemy. It's more likely if you're more under-leveled, which we are, because we're like level 5, this is a level 18 area. So because of that, I'm going to save just in case I get surprised, and I actually do get surprised here, which is good that I saved, because if I didn't save, I'd lose a ton of time.
Out of my way.
I get surprised by these guys, and these guys, obviously, it's a level 17 area, they're very efficient at just killing. Technically speaking, I guess I could have used... Actually, no, whatever, I just take the death. I just take the death and continue. But another thing that we're picking up here is we're picking up the Hunter sub-job. So sub-jobs are a mechanic. Each character can have 2 jobs. You can have one, you can have your basic, every character has a starting job, and then also have a second job which you can equip. So now I'm going to learn some skills. I'm going to learn Armor Corrosive on Throne, and I'm just going to learn any 2 Scholar skills on Oswald. Armor Corrosive is a skill that lets me debuff the enemy's defense, which will increase my physical damage, which is really going to be pretty useful for the early game of the run. And I got Evasive Maneuvers with Oswald, which, by learning 2 Scholar skills. So now I don't get nearly as many random encounters. But now coming soon is actually the newest addition to the run. This is the JP Augmentor. This item wasn't picked up in the previous run because it was thought to be slower. It's like a minute-long detour to pick this thing up. But it actually ends up saving time overall. It's really useful. I'll get into what lets me do it later. It actually comes up. But the JP Augmentor is basically an item which will increase the JP earned by my... When equipped, it'll increase the JP that I earn from every battle I win by 50%. And that's to the entire party, not just to one character. It's very, very useful. And if you want to do this exact thing that I do here casually, you can. It's pretty useful. So basically I go here, I save at the save point, which will reset the step counter for getting an encounter. It just makes it more consistent to get to the JP Augmentor without getting an enemy encounter, because obviously there's a little 48 area. If I get an enemy encounter, I'm extremely dead. So I'm basically just walking over here, grabbing the JP Augmentor, equipping that on Throne, and then I'm heading back to here and continuing with the run as I usually would, which was I would head this way. So because I did the detour to grab the JP Augmentor, I'm actually going to, like if you're going to look at my splits, I'm actually going to be like a fair bit behind, but I'm not really behind, because the JP Augmentor will save me time over the course of the run. And then here I'm just kind of realizing, hey, I can't actually break both of these enemies with the characters I have. Well, I think, thinking back, I actually could have done it, but it would have been a bit slow, so I just ran, and luckily I actually just got the first try. So now on some screens you're going to see me walk like this for the entire thing, and that's because the screen is short enough that if I walk, I will be able to not get any enemy encounters, which is very, very useful for the run. Especially since, at this point, we're pretty low level, and it's going to be pretty slow to break or kill enemies. So we're actually going to grab Agnia here. This is something that we originally would delay in the old route, but now we're going to pick her up immediately. And without JP Augmentor, it actually does save time to do this, but it was just something that I had never routed in. But with JP Augmentor, you can actually save even more time by just keeping a party for longer. I'll kind of mention what it lets you do by keeping her. So here, this is actually a pretty good encounter to get, because these enemies are all, or rather 2 of them are weak to ice, and one's weak to sword, so I can just break them both. Well, I think the other one's actually weak to dagger as well, I just didn't remember that. So I could have used Throne's dagger attacks or Agnia's dagger attacks to break them, but I'm not actually sure. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, so on this screen I'm going to do more walking, to avoid encounters, yada yada. So I guess now that we're doing a little bit more boring stuff, I'll kind of explain a little bit about like why Throne was the starting pick. So your starting character is basically locked into the party until you complete their story. So Throne is just a very good character to have locked in the party, both between her free buffs at night, which are very, very useful, like getting a free attack buff and a free speed buff, and elemental attack buff, very, very useful for basically any speed run, so that's just incredibly useful. And then also, she has good path actions, and yeah, she's just a really powerful character to have in the party at all times. Also, she has a fast starting chapter and is in a good location. So while I was talking about that, I grabbed Partitio. Partitio is a merchant, and for speedrunning, and I mean for casual play too, merchant is a really, really powerful job. And I'll get into that when we start actually fighting some bosses. So again, just doing more walking to not get encounters, but unlike the last run I did of this, I'm going over to the town where Hikari, the warrior, picks up, or Hikari the warrior is, but I'm not actually going to get him immediately. Like, I'm going to unlock him, but I'm not going to add him to my party. And this is a thing I can do because of JP Augmentor.
May I have this dance? My turn.
So, to kill these little soldiers to get an Hikari, I just throw an ice soulstone like that, and then just attack anyone, and it kills. Which just shows how good soulstones are. But speaking of soulstones, back at the black market, I bought medium soulstones as well, which deal 1,100 damage instead of the 200 that the small soulstones do. So the damage is pretty good, and it basically lets me kill encounters in mid-game areas in just one hit, which is very, very useful. You saw me use that to get that was how I got evasive maneuvers back then. But I still have more soulstones, so I'm going to be using them pretty soon.
Let the experiment begin.
So here I actually got a bit lucky because sometimes you can get encounters here that are really annoying to break. But if you get these guys, you can just use Ice Wind with Ozvold, and that breaks them just fine. It's very nice. And now, basically, my next objective is to basically my next objective is basically to get the Inventor subjob. And before I want to do that, I want to unlock some of the stuff I need to make the skills for that job. Because Inventor is what's called an advanced job. Advanced jobs, in this game they kind of are treated differently, but some of them are, but they're kind of, like, no character will have an advanced job with their regular job. And the thing about them is some of them actually work differently. Inventor is one of them. Instead of actually, like, learning skills with JP, you actually craft skills with materials.
Come and get me.
Once you craft them, you can always use them. So we're actually going out of the way to get some materials for that. And as I've been saying this, I've been killing more encounters with soulstones. And the reason I've been killing encounters at night specifically here is not because the Throne buffs affect soulstones in any way, but instead just because the encounters at night in that area just give more JP than the encounters during the day. So that's the entire reason for that. So now I've come to Conning Greek, and in addition to picking up one of the materials I need for the Inventor job, I can also steal a soulstone. That's a large soulstone from this guy. The large soulstone does 2,700 damage, which is pretty massive. And come in handy later. So I'm just grabbing the one last thing I need, plus another character. This is Cassie. Cassie's an apothecary. Again, won't be adding her to the party yet, but that was a thing I did in the last run as well. I just get her and then skip adding her to the party. Of course, every character will be used somewhat in this run. You'll just be using them later. Anyway, so I buy a critical earring here, which goes with the unerring earring that I bought during Thorny's Chapter 1, and those two are the materials to craft a Inventor skill. And here I'm going to use Agnia's Entreat path action. So, Entreat is kind of like Steal, except instead of it being a chance to steal, which increases as Thorny levels, it's instead, if Agnia is the correct level to entreat something, she can just entreat it. So I entreated a medium fire soulstone, which is going to be useful later. Also, getting surprised here kind of sucks, but it should still be fine. If I remember correctly, I just break these guys. So I just break all of them, and then... I thought that guy was weak to spear. I think he might be weak to bow. That was bad. But I know he's weak to staff, so I can just chuck the staff. I can just hit him with the staff and break him. So now I'm going to be getting the Inventor subjob. And the main reason that I go to the way to get Inventor as soon as possible is because Inventor has the best support skill in the entire game. And by crafting 2 inventions, which is the Elemental Bomb Bottle with the item I picked up in Conning Creek, plus some soulstones I bought from the black market, and the critical scope from those 2 earrings I bought. And now I just unlocked the Step Ahead passive. And I don't actually, in this route, I don't actually equip it immediately, because one of the characters I want to equip it on isn't in the party yet. But it is insanely good. It basically gives every character that has it equipped a free bonus turn to start the battle, which is extremely good. So if I equip it on everyone, I basically get a full round to do whatever I want before the enemies get to do anything, which is really good. Like, have I mentioned that it's really good? I sound like a broken record at this point. Anyway. So, now I'm going to go complete Partitio's Chapter 2. The main objective of kind of the early game of this run is I want to complete Hikari's Chapter 2, because that'll unlock a quest that gives me an extremely useful item for the run, and I want to get that item as soon as possible, basically. But before I can do that, I have to do Partitio's Chapter 2, because that chapter is going to give me a fair bit of money. So right now I'm kind of just exploring, doing the basic story. Basic story stuff. I'm trying to think of anything else I can say. Probably not. Basically, if this was, say, like a marathon run, this would be a perfect time for kind of donation, like a donation or two, because I'm just kind of exploring around, grabbing items. But now at this point, I'm almost done kind of the story stuff. At least with some story stuff, and I'll explain like a concept that's going to be pretty relevant for the entire run. So basically, several stories will have like parts in them where you need to backtrack. Like this is one of them. Like I need to go back to the first screen and grab Clockmaker. But because instead of doing that, I'm going to warp away. I'm going to fast travel away because this game is a fast travel system, and then just fast travel back. So what I just did there is I picked up the Thief subjob, and I used Agnia's Entreat on an NPC that's in the Thieves Guild that has like a bunch of money items. Honestly, that item actually is anyway, the money items are going to be really useful, obviously, to get money. And right here, I'm going to hire someone with Partitio's path action. So Partitio has a passive that basically lets him get additional bonuses, money-related, based on what NPC he has following him. So in this case, the NPC that I just got gives me extra money when I sell things. So I basically sold the items that I stole, and I got, or entreated, Agnia. And that's kind of the end of Agnia's early adventures in the party. So she gets me a free soul stone and gets you a... she lets me get a free soul stone, and she lets me get about 30,000 in cash by entreating from that play. And now I just equip Step Ahead on everyone, so now you get to see what it does. The Step Ahead turn comes in, and the entire party gets a free turn, which is ridiculous. But back to... anyway, we're going to head to the town of Crackridge, because Crackridge is where the merchant job is located as a sub-job. And I mentioned merchant is really good, so merchant sub-job is going to be extremely important to this run. So basically, this is the first kind of showing of like what Step Ahead lets you do. In this, against this group of enemies, that back enemy with like the big kind of armadillo thing called an Armor Eater. Basically, the thing about it is that it's tanky enough that a Soulstone won't kill it. So because of that, I need to break it first, and Step Ahead gives me the turns I need to do that, which is very nice. And then I can't speak. Then I got caught by surprise here, which because getting surprised makes you forfeit the Step Ahead turn, it basically is just an immediate party wipe. If I get surprised, which is really unfortunate. So that loses probably around 20 seconds there. The early game of this run it was decent, but getting surprised twice does kind of hurt. So again, here, I don't get surprised here, so I actually get to show how this fight works again. So you just break that guy with sword attacks, and then throw a soul stone to kill him. This is actually the reason that I picked up light soul stones specifically this battle, because those moles that come along with the armor eater are weak to light, and they have enough health that if they aren't weak to the soul stone, they actually survive. And then here, I'm going to challenge this guy using Hikari's day path action, so it lets him fight people. But the main reason I just fight that guy is because, just like saving and quitting did earlier, challenging and fleeing from an NPC will reset your step counter, which is very useful. So now I'm going to head right back to the story because, again, I needed to backtrack, so I go away, do something else, and then come back. Then right there, I just bought some soul stones from that NPC, which will, again, be used to kill some more encounters, because right now, soul stones are kind of our only good way of dealing a great way of dealing a lot of just killing an enemy encounter instantly. And we don't really have any, gear to let us do that without soul stones. And speaking of soul stones, we're going to get into a battle story pretty soon, and I wonder how I'm going to defeat that one. If you guessed soul stones, you'd be absolutely correct.
Stand aside or fight.
These guards are another example of enemies where I'm taking advantage of the fact that you do extra damage in this weakness. So the soul stone, they do 30% extra damage when you hit an enemy's weakness, assuming they aren't broken. If they're broken, they take double damage, and that doesn't apply. But those guards actually have enough health to survive a soul stone they're not weak to, but they're weak to fire and they're weak to lightning. So I'm going to use both fire and lightning to kill the guards. So here I use fire to kill them.
No need for flattery. It'll rust my soul.
And now, thanks to the JP augmentor, I can actually go and learn some skills. So I'm learning some merchant skills on everyone. Kind of fumbling around because I don't actually remember if I need donate BP. Spoiler alert, I don't. But I'm learning merchant skills on everyone. And the reason I'm getting merchant skills on everyone is for the boost start passive. And what the boost start passive does is it gives you 2 BP at the start of every battle with the equipped character instead of 1. Which is very useful in a speedrun when we're going to end most battles in 2 turns. And speaking of a battle we're going to end in 2 turns, this one.
Not this time.
So this boss is going to be the first showcase of just how good merchant is. So I'm going to basically be using spear and axe attacks to break this boss. And I'm going to collect money from it. Merchant skill. This boss just has a ton of money. I'm going to use the hired help skill. Hired help basically lets you summon mercenaries to fight for you. And there's several different options of what you can actually get. So right there we use the guards. The guards deal pretty decent damage, enough to, obviously you just saw it just completely obliterate a Chapter 2 boss, and they cost 7,000. Because yeah, hired help costs money instead of SP. So here, I'm gonna get merchant skills on Hikari, put Oswald as Thief, which will be useful later, learn a Thief skill on Throne, or learn HP Thief on Throne, rather, which she'll need later, and then equip some more skills. So now our entire party has Step Ahead and Boost Start, which basically just makes boss fights a lot easier. Because yeah, Step Ahead works on bosses, which as you probably saw, which means literally every boss we're going to have multiple of our characters that just go before it, which is incredibly useful. So here I can walk to skip an encounter. At least most of the time skip an encounter. I think that's probably the case with most of the times I walk. Technically speaking, I can still get the encounter even though I walk, but the odds are pretty low. So same here, just walk here. Again, go to a town that we'll need to fast travel to later, but we'll pick it up now because we're in the area. Yeah, see, even though I walked here, I still got the encounter. I think that one's actually really rare. I think if your movement is good, I think your chance of getting the encounter there is like under 10%. I don't know the math. I've just kind of seen another speedrunner mention that, and I was like, okay, that seems about right to me. But here, since we're going far enough, we won't actually be able to walk. We just run.
What?
And here I actually surprised the enemy. And surprising the enemy is useful in the early game, because if you surprise the enemy, your odds of running away are 100%. So you can just run away immediately. Excuse me. Okay, then these guys, again, you just gotta kind of run away. Yep. I think my luck is pretty bad on this encounter. No, maybe it's the next one. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of another one. But effectively, I'm just kind of going around. I'm going to grab more sub-jobs. So this is Cleric. Oh, right, one thing I did want to kind of touch on, while I'm kind of just running away from encounters here, is because I have to do all the main story for the game, this run is pretty similar in structure to an 8% run. Oh yeah, that was my luck. I caught myself runs here.
My turn.
But it's pretty similar in structure to an 8% run. Because an 80% run, you have to do all the stories.
Now it begins.
So it's not going to be identical, obviously, but it's going to be similar-ish. But one of the differences there is we're picking up some additional jobs. So we picked up Thief back near the beginning of the run, and then we picked up Cleric there. And I'll explain why those jobs are useful when they become relevant. And here we can just walk and get to the town. And now we're actually in the area for Hikari's Chapter 2, which is going to be very, very useful. Or, I don't know why I said it's going to be very useful, I just mean it's exactly where we want to be. So, Hikari's Chapter 2, in what seems to be standard fashion for an Octopath Traveler 2 or an Octopath Traveler Warriors Chapter 2, because in the first game, the warrior also had to fight in an arena. But basically, he's fighting in an arena. So, the go-to strategy for winning these arena fights is just soul stones. Basically, breaking the enemy and throwing soul stones at them. And that was just a thing from Hikari. That's Hikari's talent. So Hikari's passive ability is that when he defeats an NPC in battle, using his challenge path action, he can learn a skill from them. And we're going to use this a little bit during the run. Like, it's useful. I mean, in a casual setting, obviously, it's much better because, you're able to go out of the way from things, but, like, in a speedrun, going out of the way to learn things you don't really want to do. So, we're kind of limited in what we get access to, but the skills we do get in the run are actually going to be pretty good. Like, we aren't going to, like, the passive is going to get used, basically. Anyway, so we beat up those three guys with an Ice Soulstone. Then, this next fight, if you remember keenly from my last run, the way you used to kill this was with another large soulstone, but I don't actually have a large soulstone, so instead I'm going to use two medium soulstones. So I'm going to use a thunder medium here, I'm going to break him with some sword attacks, and then use another medium soulstone, I think a fire medium, and defeat him.
I still have much to learn.
And this guy here has a learned skill called Slowing Sweep, and I should have learned it, but I forgot. Or I think I just meant to click accept to learn it, and I clicked no. So that actually lost me a little bit of time, because the one time you actually want that learned skill is on this next fight here. On this next fight, if you get bad turn order, you can basically use Slowing Sweep to make the enemy act last on the next turn. So I actually in this run I actually get the bad turn order here. So if I had Slowing Sweep, what I could have done is I could have used it here, and then the boss wouldn't be able to double slash me. I mean, it's not a boss, it's just kind of... It's a mini-boss, because then you have to fight this guy as an actual boss with your party. So then this fight is going to go pretty similar to the last one, only I'm not going to need to collect money from them. But yeah, I do find it funny that random dog just has 30,000, I thought. Anyway, so I'm gonna break this guy with dagger and spear attacks, and then I'm gonna attack guards and
All in a day's work.
And again, the reason I lost time there is because in this route, you actually go and start. Basically, you're doing stories in different order. Also, I did not mean to open up the map there. There's a few tiny mistakes in this run, but I think overall I played decently well. So, this is the reason that you do Hikari's Chapter 2 early, because it unlocks this quest, Tourney Champion. When you complete the Tourney Champion quest, and it's part of the mission, you get to do this fight at the other time, and it's a pretty difficult fight, but I can just use hired help veterans, which are the most expensive option. That'll win me the fight, and the reason I want to win that fight is because of the Champion's Belt that I got as a draw. So the Champion's Belt gives 100 physical attack, 100 crit, which increases my crit chance, and makes me unable to get surprised by enemies. So it's very useful. The main reason you want it really early on in this run is just so that you aren't able to get surprised by enemies anymore. But obviously the stats are going to be really useful for the entire run as well. So now we're going to grab Temenos, and Temenos is one of the most important characters in this run. So we pick him up now. So the reason you want Temenos is because Temenos has a similar ability to Throne. His passive ability will basically debuff all the enemies. Like, it'll debuff their defense, elemental defense, and their it'll debuff defense, it'll debuff elemental defense, and it'll blind them at the beginning of every battle, which is just really useful in general, especially in a speedrun setting. More damage is good. So in this fight, you take advantage of the debuff defenses and just defeat this little mini-boss with more hired help guards.
All tidied up.
But yeah, that's another point. We would have needed to backtrack. So instead, we'll fast travel away to do somewhere else, and in this case, it's complete Thrones Chapter 2. So to complete this chapter, it's basically just... This chapter, every character has one chapter that doesn't have a boss, and this is Thrones. So it's basically... It's just kind of story stuff, but I'm skipping all the cutscenes, so it seems a little pointless in this run. But anyway, I steal this mask off the guy, participate in some Russian roulette, and, standard stuff, And now that I'm done with Thrones Chapter 2, I can head right back to Oswald's story chapter, and I can continue. So coming up next in this area we're about to go into for Oswald's story, the enemies that you get as your first encounter in this area actually have a really useful item. So there's similar to how we used the merchant job to collect money from. Similar to how you can use the merchant job to collect money, you can use the thief job to take items from NPCs or from enemies. And these enemies actually have a really useful item you can steal from.
Ready?
And so to steal them, I'm going to use Partitio to break them all and help. And use the steal skill, Oswald and Throne, to grab forbidden elixirs. And these are a consumable item, and they'll be very, very useful towards the end of the run, so I'll explain them more at that point. So now we're about to fight Stenvar.
What a waste of time.
So Stenvar we're going to again collect money from. One of the disadvantages of collecting money like this is that if the enemy's still at full health, you have a 95% chance to get the money. So, in this run, while you collect on Garnet, which is the dog, is required, the collect on Stenvar does actually have a backup strategy, which is nice. But ideally, you still want to hit it. So one difference that you might have noticed, that you may notice, or I should stop saying may notice, because, it was a 3-hour video. You probably don't remember much, but I remember a lot, because I do the speedruns. So basically, one of the differences is that I don't actually grab the apothecary job in that town anymore, because it's just not needed in the run anymore. It was only used for endgame, and there's an alternative. There's some new endgame strats that will make it so that apothecary isn't needed. Another thing that I just skipped is normally I would have stolen a dazzling artwork, an NPC. It's a 65% chance steal, so it's ideally you not want to do it, because you can lose time to failing to steal. Also, for Oswald's story here, he has to use his scrutinize path action to get info from people, and despite it being an 84% chance on that first NPC, a 60% on the second, and a 72% on the third one, he did them all first try, so Oswald's kind of the GOAT. Another thing that's skipped here is down here, there is one thing that's kind of like a theme. With the JP Augmentor route, you don't need nearly as much money. So there's a chest with money in it that I grab in my old route, but this route you don't need. So here, I'm just going to kill these enemies guards. And when you break enemy, I didn't mention this. So I haven't mentioned latent powers, but now is a good time, I guess. So latent powers are those little diamonds next to the characters. And I'm about to use Partitios in this fight here. So you can get them by breaking enemies and taking damage. So in this case, I broke some enemies with Partitio. That gives me latent. When I use Partitio's latent, I get a full refill on my BP. So I can just break this guy turn 1 and just summon Beast Slings and win. This is a pretty different strat than the last run. With the last run, I had to... the last run was a slightly different kill than that. But I like the new one because it uses Partitio's latent, which is a little neat. Plus, it's just faster, so there's that too. It does cost more money, but whatever. Anyway, thanks to JP Augmentor, we can now learn cleric skills in Partitio. And the whole point of learning the cleric skills is it unlocks the Evil Ward passive. So Evil Ward will greatly increase the odds that we can run away from enemies, to the point that we can actually feasibly run away from encounters, even in areas where we're really unrun before. Combined with the Champion's Belt, so I just ran away from that one, so we're heading into level 45 area, and combined with the Champion's Belt, this actually means it's pretty consistent to just waltz on into a level 45 area like we're doing right now, run into some enemies, and then just run away from them, and you don't have to fight them. So the reason I defended there is defending in this game makes you go first on the next turn, and defending there basically means I get 2 chances to run away before the enemy gets to go. Also, this was a minor mistake. I was meant to grab this chest before going to the town, but it's really not that big of a deal. But yeah, I should probably talk about latent powers. I've kind of glossed over that. So latent powers, you get them by either mainly by breaking enemies and by taking damage. In this run, it's going to be mainly breaking enemies. So, because of all those enemies I broke with Partitio, it actually guarantees that he has latent for that fight. And then earlier on in the run, I actually needed to use Throne's latent to, in that battle where I got the Champion's Belt, I used Throne's latent, because Throne's latent gives you an extra turn, which is really useful. So if you remember back in, probably about 10 minutes ago when I did that fight, I was able to defend, then I was able to use both Armor Corrosive to debuff the enemy's defense, and then use Hired Help Veterans to kill. But another difference of JP Augmentor here, so JP Augmentor let us get Evil Ward much earlier, but the other difference is that in the non-JP Augmentor run, I actually have to kill encounters in this area, And the reason for that is just simply... I just need extra JP to learn skills, but in this run, since I have the JP augmentor, I just don't need to kill these enemies, which is really useful. I just picked up the Scholar. The Scholar sub-job. And Scholar is obviously really, really useful for this run, because it lets us have evasive maneuvers, access to evasive maneuvers, without needing to have Oswald in control. So the new evasive maneuvers user is going to be Temenos. I also learned a hunter skill on Temenos called Abating Orb, and that'll come up later. Actually, I guess now is a decent time to explain what the heck Abating Orb does. So Abating Orb casually isn't that good of a skill. Also, I'm going to grab a Casti here, and I'm going to complete a side quest. So earlier on in the run, I bought a pickaxe, and I can use the pickaxe to complete this quest. And that gets me the Rusty Sword, which will be useful later. But anyway, now is a decent time to explain, Abating Orb. I was right. Abating Orb. So, Abating Orb casually isn't really that good. It basically just it clears debuffs from enemies, and in a casual setting that's, like, sometimes useful, but most of the time it's just not that needed. Sorry, it clears buffs if I didn't... I think I said debuffs by accident, but you use it and it'll clear the buffs on the enemy. But enemies don't tend to buff themselves too much, so it doesn't come in handy that much. And obviously in a speedrun, you don't want to see the enemy use buffing. You don't want to give the enemy turns as much as possible. So it seems like a weird skill to be used in a speedrun. But what Abating Orb actually does in the speedrun is there's going to be bosses where the game is basically set up so the boss cannot die until a certain dialogue trigger is reached. And Abating Orb just but for whatever reason, that cannot die part is treated as a buff, so you can remove it, and then you can kill them as normal. So we're going to use that on quite a few bosses in the run. I say that, and this is not one of the bosses. So this boss, we just one action kill by just summoning Hired Help Beastlings, and there we go.
All tidied up.
Hired Help Beastlings, I think, are kind of our go-to, or sort of a go-to in this run. They're extremely, extremely good because they're the second strongest option after veterans. And they also will always break a shield on the enemy, regardless of what. Like, if you don't need to hit a weakness to break a shield with them.
Ready?
So there was actually a shadow battle. So those are like a little... It's a story-related thing, and they're, like, in a casual setting, kind of random when they occur, but in a speedrun, they're actually consistent. Like, they'll occur at the same times within a row, but it's not really known to I don't think it's really known to triggers them. So whenever I do a run of this, you always get a battle there. Now we're heading into another level 45 area, so I can just run from the encounter using Evil Ward, and continue on. Now I've gotten to the town of Gravel, and I'm going to be unlocking the Armsmaster job. So Armsmaster is kind of like... Yeah, so... Oh my god! I forgot it was this run where I did that. Basically, I knocked out the NPC there, and then forgot to actually get the job. So, good job me for doing that. Anyway, so the way the job works is that you can repair rusty weapons at that guy, and yeah, we don't treat the weapons too well because we can just... They sell for 100,000 each, so... Turns out getting money is good. Money is good, so we just sell the weapons for money. But the Armsmaster job, basically, like, you can repair the rusty weapons, and it'll turn them into these, like, really I mean, like, you need the weapons to use the Armsmaster skills, so I mentioned for selling any of the weapons we get, so we're not really going to use the Armsmaster skills too much, but yeah. Sorry, casual players, but, like, you know, you can actually get the weapons back. Like, the guy does get, like, mad at you for doing it, and, like, you can buy them back, but obviously doing so in a speedrun is slow, and it's not like we need the weapons for anything, so yeah, we just sell them for money. And considering they sell for 100,000, and the Partitio's summon lets him get even more money when you sell them, we can just get 125,000 per weapon we sell, which is basically our main source of money throughout this run. Well, that and drops. And the first thing we're going to use this money for is more hired help on this story chapter right here. But I guess I'll explain at this point, like, what the kind of objective of this stage of the run is. And the objective is basically, we want to complete Partitio's story in full as soon as possible. This is because that when you complete a story, you basically get access to various, NPCs that you didn't have access to before completing the story. And these NPCs tend to have pretty powerful quests and or items, so we'll be taking advantage of that full well. Also, getting an encounter here is really unlucky. Wow, I did not write on encounter here. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, the early game of this run I don't think was that good. The later parts of the game I think were pretty. I think I played the later parts of the game pretty well. It's just there's a few mistakes. So, you know, like, for example, forgetting to pick up the Armsmaster job. No, I never made that mistake before. Another kind of little tidbit I'll mention is because you want two characters in the party whenever you're using Equal Board, so you have one to defend and one to run away. It's, like, normally in the old route you'd have, I think it was Temenos and Partitio be your step-ahead users. And, the awkward thing about this is obviously only one of them was a merchant. So, if only one of them is a merchant, that means you, since only one of them is a merchant, that means you have to win a coin flip to get a turn 1 kill like this, because otherwise I'd have to, like, defend Temenos and then use Partitio to kill. So I'd, have to spend an action defending. But since now, in this version of the run, since Throne is still a merchant, you can just, keep step ahead on Throne and Partitio, and then every fight, if you need a merchant to do something, well, you always will have a merchant going first, which is pretty nice. I guess that's kind of the other advantage of Step Ahead, which is simply that you can control, since you can control who has it, you can basically have as many additional actions as you need, so like up to 4 obviously, but if you don't need 4 to win, you don't need to have 4, you can have like 1 or 2. So now we're going to buy a boat, and one of the reasons it just looked like I saved 2 minutes there is because this new route switches the order of this segment a little bit. Also, I'm supposed to use a path action on her and not talk to her to buy the boat, and I talked to her like 5 times. You can customize your boat. I think I do that in this run. Yeah, I think I go for blue octopus. Nice. Good choice. Customizing the ship has literally no impact on the run, and it loses time. Like, whatever. It's cool. But yeah, it's the 2 minutes that it looks like I saved isn't really real-time save, because in the old route, I would go and buy the ship before I did the Sand Lion fight. In the new route, I do the other route. And the reason it's done the other way around is because I'm just a little bit short money. So if I went to get the ship first, The issue would simply just be I'd be slightly short money to kill the Sand Lion with hired help. So again, there's another kind of high-level area where I just ran from enemies there. There is 5 total of those in that run, so that was the in this run. That was the third one. And the old route there was 4, and the additional one was the Mary Hills one, which was the very first one we did. Because in that route, you just didn't have enough JP to learn either yet. In this next segment, this originally was a really awkward part to route for the old run, because the issue used to be that you needed to bring Agnia and Casti with you to Timberrain, which is the next area we're going to. And the reason you needed to bring both of them is for you needed Casti because you were going to use your Soothe Path action to knock out an NPC. And for Agnia, you needed to bring her because you needed her in the party to learn an EX skill. EX skills are a mechanic in this game, and you can learn them. There's 2 of them. Each character gets 2. One of them for completing their story completely, and one of them for going to a shrine in the world. So originally we would take Agnia to her shrine, to the dancer shrine, so that she can actually learn the EX skill. But in this run, we actually don't need to do it anymore, and that saves like 40 seconds, which is really, really nice. And it also makes routing this segment a lot cleaner. This part of this story gives me a little bit of a pet peeve, because that area we were right there would be a perfect candidate for backtracking to eliminate, but the game just prevents you from fast traveling for like no reason during this segment. So instead I have to wait until I get this cutscene, until I can fast travel, because I do want to skip some backtracking, so I will fast travel here. So now I'm kind of explore the sea a bit with our new boat. So we're going to go over to this chest. That chest has an item that you can sell for 50,000, which is a lot. And then now we're going to head to the town of Timberrain, which is what I kind of alluded to earlier. And on the way to Timberrain is when you get Windy Refrain, which is the skill that the EX skill Agnia would learn. It's a very strong skill casually, but in this run we now have workarounds, and as I mentioned, it's a 40-second detour. So ideally we'd not get it. And it's great because we don't actually need it anymore. Honestly, the strats that don't use it are cooler than the strats that do, so I'd say it's a win-win. You get cooler strats and you don't need to spend 40 seconds grabbing a skill. So that's kind of nice. So this is the 4th area that I have to run from high-level enemies. And of course, as I get further along in the run, this gets a little bit easier because I get levels. Because running, the flee chance is based on level. But yep, second try to the charm, and now we're going to head to... And the reason we're coming here is for another one of those rusty weapons that I mentioned earlier. So we had already got the rusty sword from that quest. Now we're going to get the rusty spear here. And the way we're going to do that, normally you have to beat a pretty difficult NPC and knock them out. But we can just use Casti's Soothe and basically just drug them, using some materials we've been kind of picking up as we went along. Call it Herb of Serenity. So we grab the rusty spear, and there's one more rusty weapon we want. We want the rusty dagger, which means we're going to the Shipwreck of the Empress, which is where it is. And the rusty dagger will be the only one of the 3 weapons that we don't sell immediately, because it's got 300 attack, and Throne has dagger skills. She's a thief, so we could use the rusty dagger or rather the Dancer's Blade, which is what it gets turned into, as a pretty just decent weapon for Throne to use for a little bit. But obviously, you know, because it sells for so much money, we'll still want to sell it, we just will delay selling it for a bit. So now here I just go, I don't know why there's hesitation on my part, but I'm gonna go. He gets mad at me for selling off the Conqueror's Sword, and then gives me the other 2 weapons anyway. But the main reason that we get 3 weapons is because 3 weapons unlocks the peak performance passive. Also, we're going to quickly go and grab the XP augmentor here. And the EXP augmentor is the equivalent of the JP augmentor, except it gives XP instead of JP, so it gives experience. So it's helpful for leveling up, which I'll mention why that's useful later. But anyway, we can sell off the Warlord's Spear, and we can sell off the Sunken Gold Statue, which is that item I mentioned that sells for 50k. So between those 2 items, we just got, like, almost 200,000 in cash, which is very, very useful. Because we want money, of course, to buy things and to use hired help. And because this route is still, like, a little new to me, there's some kind of hesitations on, like, me not knowing what exactly to do. But there we go, I just swap Oswald back into the party. And now we're actually ready to do Propitia's Chapter 3 boss. But before that, I have some story, so I'm going to equip before I do the story, I'm going to equip the EXP Augmentor to Temenos, because he'll use it for basically the entire run. And just like the JP Augmentor, it applies to the entire party. I give Throne the Inventor job, so she'll be using some of the skills from that job. And I give Oswald Merchant, because this next fight still needs 2 merchants, and since Throne is no longer my second merchant, I need Oswald as my second merchant. This music is cool. So now we're going to go fight the boss. And I think I remember this boss kill being a little bit scuffed, like I didn't do what I was supposed to do, but it ended up working out anyway. But we equipped the Dancer's Blade of Throne, so she actually has a pretty powerful... So the dagger skill we're going to use on her is HP Thief. We learned that earlier, and since she has a pretty strong dagger now, it'll actually hit decent hard. So Throne is going first, which is actually the perfect turn order here, so we can just use HP Thief to kill the steam engine. And then, so what I'm supposed to do here is have Temenos and Oswald break, but I was supposed to boost with Oswald. I was supposed to boost with Oswald, do 3 attacks. I can just boost with Temenos instead, so it worked out fine. And hired help veterans again. Beastlings would have worked. Beastlings could have worked there, but the issue with Beastlings in that context is simply the boss didn't have debuff defense, so I don't think they would have done quite enough damage yet. And after we complete Particia's Chapter 3, that we're on to his Chapter 4. Particio kind of has one less story chapter than everyone else, but that's mainly because he has these optional side missions called Scent of Commerce, and one of them was buying a boat, which is what we did in the run. There's 3 Scents of Commerce, but you only actually need to do one of them for the story. You need to do one of them to progress in Chapter 3, and you need to have the boat. So you can just get the boat and not do the other 2, and complete the game just fine. That's what we're going to do in this run. So now we're going to Particio Chapter 4, and this is the final area where we're going to have to run from a high-level encounter while being under-leveled. I guess I'll explain another mechanic that that was used earlier, but I think I was explaining other things at the time. So, the other mechanic is there's a thing in the game called Travel Banter. And casually, Travel Banter is basically just like a way to get some little interactions between the characters during the story. And they're kind of like little cutscenes that you can choose to view. I'm also going to walk here just so I don't get corners. So, the thing about Travel Banters is that in this game, viewing one will actually reset your step count. So in this next screen here, I'm actually going to view a Travel Banter intentionally to not get an encounter. I think this is done like 4 or so times. I think I've already used it twice. Also, I just used a reinforcing jam there to refill Thorny's leads. Technically speaking, if I wanted to be like really fast, I could have used it. I could have used the jam on her when I gave Throne the Champion's Belt, but the issue with that is that if Throne happens to die, she loses her latent power. So it's a safer strat to delay giving her the jam until that point. So now this boss, new strat. So Throne is going to use. So I'm going to defend, so my merchants go first. So I'm going to have Throne use Critical Scope, which is an Inventor skill that makes all attacks crit. Then I'm going to use HP Thief to do some chip damage. And then I use a Baiting Orb, because this is a boss that has a dialogue trigger that you can skip. And then I use Hired Held Veterans twice and kill once. This kill is about 20 seconds faster than the kill that I used in the past route. But the disadvantage of this kill compared to the one in the other route is the one in the other route would collect money from this boss. So it would end up with actually being 7,000 richer than you started out the fight with. But in this run specifically, you actually have the spare money to just end up the fight 60k in the hole. So you're basically spending 67,000 for that strat, but you save 20 seconds with it, so it's kind of worth. And so now I'm going to unequip the Dancer's Blade because I need money, so Dancer's Blade. See ya. You actually kind of did something, so you know what? I don't miss you that badly. So, you weren't completely useless. Anyway, so I'm gonna scrutinize. This is because I'm going here because I'm getting stuff to complete a quest that is unlocked by completing Partitio's story. So I'm gonna swap in party members here. And I'm gonna use Hikari's bribe action. This is a way to get information from NPCs at night. So I'm gonna bribe that guy. And now, so I have the 2 pieces of info I need. I'm also going to do a quick job menu, so Hikari becomes Merchant. Because I swapped Temenos out, I don't actually have anyone that has evasive maneuvers on right now, so I'm going to give that to Casti. And I'm going to give Throne the Life in the Shadows passive. Life in the Shadows gives 50% extra XP and JP from battles as long as they're done at night. But we want to do battles at night anyway for Throne's buffs, so... Well, they don't affect hired help, but for battles that we aren't doing with hired help, Throne's buffs are useful. Well, we want to do it with Temenos' buffs, but anyway, 50% extra XP and JP is very useful, so we'll be using that too. So now we just completed a quest, and the quest gives an item called the Butler's Tailcoat, which gives a pretty good amount of crit. It's an armor piece that gives a good amount of crit, which is going to be useful in the run, but it's not the main reason we do the quest. The main reason we do the quest is for the ability to get Alrond as a follower. So we hired him with Partitio, and Alrond is extremely, extremely powerful. When you summon Alrond in battle, he can give XP and JP modifiers. So we're going to abuse that in this fight. So this fight drops a ton of XP and JP. So I'm going to summon, I get XP times 100, which is great luck. If you remember from my last run, this took 4 tries to get, because it's a 29% chance to get the modifiers you want in the number of tries you have. But in this fight, in this run, I get pretty good luck. So I want XP 100, and I want JPX10 or JPX 100. I think I get JP out 10 right here, if I remember correctly. Nope, JPX did.
Not this time.
Meantime. Well, my turn.
My turn. Not this time.
I'm being a little extra cautious when I'm defending, just to make sure I don't accidentally run away from the enemy. There we go, I got the JPX 10 pair. And then I can use higher health beastlings to break these guys. And then I can use higher health veterans to kill them. And the reason I use critical scope on that guy in the back is to guarantee the overkill bonus. And if you just saw, I just got 720,000 XP from that fight, which is enough to take my characters from like level 10. Like I think Hikari and Casti were level 10. And the reason I save here is because I wanted to make a backup save. Well, rather, not a backup save, but like, I wanted to use this run as a practice save because, you know, it was really fast and I did everything correctly, so I just made a practice save there. I probably won't be using it, but hey, I have practice save now. Anyway, I ambushed that guy with Throne A and basically just we got some money from there and a,
Time to clean up the filth.
oh hey, that's a Chubby Kate. It's a 2% spawn, it drops a ton of XP and JP when defeated, but we don't need XP and JP anymore. But from that area, I basically just got a, from ambushing the guy, I got a extra bunch of money and I got a nut. Nuts are basically permanent stat boosts that you can consume on a character. They'll be useful later, basically. Mainly to increase our damage. But 720,000 XP is enough to take the characters from level 11. I think Hikari and Casti are around level 11, and Throne and Partitio are around level 25. They're all level 82 now, which is insane. And I also got about 8,800 JP from that, which and that's another kind of reason you want JP Augmentor, because JP Augmentor gets you even more JP from that fight. They don't stack multiplicatively, they stack additively, but it's still pretty useful. So what I just did there, I bought some equipment. So I bought the Swift Shield and Dazzling Tiara, which both are speed boosting equipment. And I bought the Breaker's Blade, which is a dagger that boosts critical. In the last run, I used Diamond Dagger, which does not boost critical, but you don't have to buy it. But in this route, it's faster to use the Breaker's Blade because you want the crit. So I'm now learning some skills. So these will kind of be our main skills for this sort of party, and this will be kind of our main party for the next little bit of the run. So I'll kind of explain what I just learned. So I just learned all the warrior skills on Throne, which gives her the deal more damage passive, which raises the damage cap on her from, well, when I equip that passive at least, it'll raise that damage cap from 9,999 to 99,999. So it basically increases the total amount of damage we can do in one hit by 10, which is very good. I mean, obviously you still have to do that much damage, but considering we're now level 82, I mean, stats don't give that much in this, like, compared to, like, equipment, they don't give nearly, like, they don't give an insane amount of stats, but when you have 82 of them, they add up. So here we're just kind of going to go complete some story, and so the point of this party specifically is, we want to get Agnia as much XP as possible. Because later on, there's going to be a story chapter where she needs to be level 35 to use the entreat action on some NPCs. And that's the reason we got the XP Augmentor. We got the XP Augmentor simply so that Agnia will be able to level up fast enough, and that's also why we got the Thief Mask. That's also why we got the Thief Job. Just real quick, this is a course. This is Temenos' Night Path action. It lets him get info from NPCs by beating them up, or by breaking them, rather. So we need to break them, and the best way of doing that, both of Temenos' story courses are weak to sword, so you can just use Warrior, which has Aggressive Slash, which is a sword attack that hits 3 times plus 1 for each boost you do. So now I'm gonna actually give Throny all the equipment I got. And learn Aber's Reckoning. Aber's Reckoning is my go-to damage skill for the run. And what it effectively does is it's an AoE dagger attack that does more damage the more speed you have. It scales off of both attack and speed, and if I remember correctly, it scales more from attack than from speed, but you still want to have both. And it's really strong, so it's going to be our main damage source for a good portion of this run. But we don't need it for this guy. We just
So it goes.
With the gear we now have a bunch of attack. We have our build actually has an 100% crit chance against everything we'll be fighting, which is very useful. Thanks to that dagger we have, plus the champion's belt giving crit, plus the butler's tailcoat giving us more crit. So we have basically a lot of crit, and we also have a bunch of speed. So we have just lots of damage from Abers. So now we're going to do some optional drops. So any percent we're not doing these, but we need the drops for them. So this is the shark, and Bye Shark.
I take what I want.
That just kind of shows what kind of power Aber's Reckoning is going to be doing, and that's not even its final form. We'll be giving it even more. We're going to be using even more stuff to boost its damage and just get it up to truly insane levels. Now this is the single biggest mistake in the run right here. So the issue here is I was meant to switch to Knight for this boss fight. So I was meant to switch to Knight. I forget to switch to Knight here. And I realized, so I used 6-fold strike here, which means all weapon types, and then I realized, hey wait, that damage is way lower than it was supposed to be. Something's not right here. I look, I realize, where are my buffs? Oh wait, it wasn't Knight, so then I ulted 4 out of the game. So my right now is just a black screen because my capture obviously is capturing Octopath 2, and I haven't launched it, so now I've launched the game back up again. So this lost me, I think. I haven't actually looked at how much time it loses, but it probably lost me like a minute. So yeah, good one, me. But anyway, I guess I can explain what the heck 6-fold strike does. So it hits for every end of the bosses. So on that boss, the gimmick of it is that basically when you hit its weakness, it'll remove that weakness until it has just one left. So I'm basically going to use 6-fold strike to hit all of its weaknesses, switch it just down to dagger, or just down to bow, and then I can use Hikari to break it with bow attacks. And also, actually I'll just plan the fight first. So I'm going to, again, hit it 6 weaknesses with Throne, break it with Hikari, use Aber's Reckoning to hit for damage cap. That will not be the last time you hit damage cap on it. Refill Throne's BP with item, and then kill with HP here.
And so it goes.
So the way we're getting tons of XP is from doing some of these optional fights with her in the party. And we basically need all of the stuff that we get from this dungeon. So we're going to basically get. Before I explain again, we'll give Hikari a bunch of gear that we just got. So we just got an item called the Fang of Ferocity, which gives us 30% extra damage on skills when we boost. Well, it works on attacks too, but it gives you 30% extra damage on turns you boost, which is very, very useful. And in past runs, in the old route, you'd put that on Throne, but we actually will not need to use that on Throne for the run. We'll be using a different accessory. So you can actually put it on Hikari, and that lets you save some time, which is nice. But back to Agnia. So Agnia needs to be level 35, and the only way to get that XP in time is 1, to take her to most of those optional fights we're doing, 2, get the XP augmentor, which we got earlier, and now Temenos has that, so Agnia will be getting the extra XP, and we need the Life in the Shadows passive. So Throne can't be the one to use it because she needs all of her passives. She needs, currently her support skills are a step ahead, so she acts first, or so that she gets a free action at the beginning of every fight. Boost start, so she gets 2 BP instead of 3, or instead of 1. And the reason you want that is because Aber's Reckoning is what's called a Divine skill, and Divine skills need 3 BP to be used. They're pretty powerful, at least most of them are, but you need 3 BP to use them. We have Deal More Damage on Throne, which obviously raises the damage cap, and then the final skill we have is Peak Performance, which we got early. And I don't think I actually explained what that did. So what Peak Performance does is it gives you a 50% extra damage, 50% damage boost when you are at full health, which, considering this is a speedrun, we're going to basically be at full health all the time. We're not going to be taking much damage. But on the subject of Peak Performance, this is actually probably a perfect time to bring up what Peak Performance does, because this is probably a very significant time. This is probably the single most important part where it's like, oh yeah, so Peak Performance is actually giving you health. Like, you need to be at full health to get Peak Performance. This is the part where that's the most relevant. So in this chapter, so we just equipped, the other gear we equipped on Hikari, by the way, is we equipped the Tornado Glaive, which is a pretty powerful spear. It has a secondary effect that is the main reason you get it. It increases wind damage done, but that's not why Hikari wants it. He wants it because it's a good spear. It's got a lot of attack. And then we also give him the Lost Tribe's Blade, which was a sword that we got from defeating that shark. And so on this next fight, we're actually going to use Hikari's Latent Power. So Hikari's Latent Power gives him the pick of 3 skills, and one of them is an AoE, so that's the one we're going to use here. So we're going to use Sogetsu-sen, and that just kills the defense.
There's no need for flattery. It'll rust my soul.
And now this is the part where you need to be at where you want to be at full health. So this fight is interesting. So there's normally a cutscene in this fight, but if you Abating Orb, you can skip the cutscene if you kill them. And the reason we switched to the spear there is our spear gives us a bunch of evasion. And basically, we use the evasion to have a pretty good chance at dodging that attack the boss tried to hit us with. And if we dodge that attack, if we dodge the attack, you can kill with Piercing Thrust in 1 hit, which is very, very nice. However, if the boss actually still hits you, which can happen, you would have to you basically have to use Piercing Thrust again, basically. So it's a little unfortunate if the boss hits you, but fortunately I didn't get hit, so I ended up saving some time there. So the fact that we're using Abating Orb there to on Hikari's battles, like on Hikari's challenges in the story, is actually pretty unique to this run. Like, it's not used in other categories because the issue is Hikari just doesn't have, like, usually you just don't have enough stuff on him to make him powerful enough to kill. So usually the strategy to beat those challenges would be you to use Merchant and then just use Hired Help. But you can't have 2 sub-jobs. You can't have both Merchant for Hired Help and a Hunter for Abating Orb. So you just pick Merchant because damage is better than being able... Like, being able to skip cutscenes is great, but you can only skip the cutscenes if you actually have the damage, and you don't have the damage. Well, in that case, on that fight, you don't actually need damage. You just need to use Abating Orb, and then you only get the cutscene when you break the boss. And, well, I think you need to break the boss and do enough damage, but whatever, who cares. Anyway, so we just stole another nut from that NPC, and now we're gonna go fight and do another fight. I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but I think it's fine. Anyway, so we're going to do another fight. This is another fight where you actually need Abating Orb. you need it on Mother as well, which you might have noticed.
Come and get me.
I think I was talking about Agnia at that point.
My turn.
But yeah, with the Life in the Shadows passive, which right, I didn't actually mention who has that. So Throne can't have it because all their slots are full. So Hikari is the one to have it. So Hikari has Life in the Shadows right now. So with all those bonuses, we can actually get just enough XP on Agnia to not need to basically just not need to do anything additional. So in regular any percent, what we would do instead of doing what we're doing to get XP on Agnia is you'd actually just bring Agnia to the Assassin's fight and just get her to level, level 50 or level 80 or whatever you get from the XP modifier. But in this run, we specifically need to bring Hikari there because we'll need him for endgame to deal lots of damage. We'll need him at high level for endgame, basically. So anyway, just a baiting orb with this boss, and then Aber's Wreck.
Too easy. And so it goes.
And you can tell this is one of my first like serious runs with this route because my splits are empty. Because I don't have any comparison. I don't have anything to compare it to. Like, this run was literally just intended as a kind of, I want to do like a serious run to get some splits, and then I'll beat them later, and then I ended up getting a really good run. So, yeah, that's how this run came to be. But I just unequipped a step ahead from Hikari there, and the reason I did that is because there's, I think, about a stretch of 5 bosses where you aren't going to need a baiting orb. And since we don't need a baiting orb, you can just unequip step ahead from Hikari, so that only Throne gets an action. And that's also why in my splits it says minus ASA, because that's for unequipped step ahead. Just a quick reminder to myself, like, oh yeah, you actually have to do that. Because it's something I have forgotten.
What to do?
But speaking of forgetting stuff, you might assume, like, you might think, like, it's a 3-hour run, like, remembering all the stuff for that sounds super daunting, right? So the thing is, I have not remembered everything for this run, especially for the new route. Like, there's still things that I forget from time to time, but all I just do is I just run this with notes.
Ready?
So I have, I have my phone in front of me, and I just have the notes pulled up, and I just kind of scroll through the notes as I need. Like, I can refer to the notes if I need them. So it's actually like a pretty approachable speed. Octopath in general is like a fairly approachable speed game. So like, even if you aren't the fastest with menus or aren't aggressive with remembering things, like, you're still able to, just have your note. You can have your notes, refer to them when you need them, and of course, the more runs you do, the more you're like, okay, I know what to do now. I don't need to look to my notes as much. And so now we're heading to Temenos' chapter 3. Anyway, chapter numbering is weird in this game. Anyway, so we're going to steal a Thunderstorm Amulet here. And Thunderstorm Amulets are extremely, extremely useful for the final boss of this run. Well, in the final fight, there's going to be some attacks that it uses that we won't be able to avoid. And it's a random target lightning attack that hits 4 times and does a ton of damage per hit. Like, it does so much damage that it'll kill... I think it kills basically any character that we have. Like, we won't have a ton of defensive gear in this run, but it'll, like, because of that, like, our characters will die in 1 to 2 hits from that lightning attack. And so what we're instead going to use to survive that attack is the Thunderstorm. So Thunderstorm Amulets basically will reduce lightning damage by 99%. So now this attack that's like doing thousands of damage to us per hit now just does like 40 damage. So you can just use the lightning amulet on, and that means that one character is practically invincible to lightning damage. So we're going to pick up 2 Thunderstorm Amulets in this run, and to do that, and we're also going to get 2 Lightning Amulets. Lightning Amulets give 50% resistance, so if you equip 2 of them at once, that means you have 100% resistance, so that basically lets us make 3 characters that will not die to that lightning attack, and that's all we need to guarantee that we win that fight. But back to this, again, just story stuff.
My turn.
This would probably be a decent segment for donations if this was a marathon run. I think this run has like a fair bit of quote-unquote downtime, because the story bosses are kind of like a little samey, where it's like, yeah, you just kind of get 3BP, click Aber's Reckoning, and then they die. But such is the way.
Stay your beak, Crow.
If you're thinking every boss in the run is going to be like this, that's not how it works. Like, the final, like, it is definitely worth sticking around, at the very least, just looking at the end bosses of this run, because the final bosses of, like, the extra battles segment is completely insane. It is super impressive, a lot of really cool strats. And speaking of the strats, I was the one who came up with the first kind of serious, like, maybe not serious, but like, in my opinion, the first like really good optimized route for this category. Like, there were some Japanese players that came before me, but in my opinion, their route was pretty bad. Like, there was a ton of RNG reliance in it. But, oh right, before I go on that tangent, I'm just gonna quickly, there's a fight here. We don't even need it to be night. We don't even need the buffs from that. Just defend, click Aber's Reckoning, and
I take what I want.
there's also going to be a quick flashback fight. And this flashback fight, you obviously don't get to keep your gear, so you instead have to just make do with whatever default you have here. So they just give you... I don't even know what their default is in this section. Hikari's literally a child. But anyway, if you attack this guy twice, and you get an extra BP, and then use the wild cut skill twice.
I have a good teacher.
But this, fun fact, this next section of the story has a whopping 11 cutscenes in a row. You can count them. I've already done that. I've been bored during a run once, I counted them, and it's 11. But anyway, back to the route. I was the one who made the first kind of, in my opinion, really optimized route. So the Japanese runners had made a route, but theirs was like really RNG reliant. And I originally looked at their runs. I'm like, this is a really cool run, but I would never run this. But then I ended up coming up with a really good strat for the final fights, and that ended up making it so that the run has a lot less RNG in it. You still have that times 100 XP, like you need to get that, but outside of that, it's not bad, which is nice. But I was not actually the one who made this route in this that I'm running right now. The route that I'm running right now is made by another runner called Quadriceps. And Quadriceps, I'm not sure if he's actually done a run of this category. I don't think he has, but I do know that he currently holds the world record for Octopath Traveler 2 80%. I think he's held that for over a year now. He also runs other stuff. He's a cool guy, but he ended up making this route for this category, and it's a pretty cool route. And it was mainly his idea to get JP Augmentor, and just kind of like he experimented with a bunch of stuff, and then I ended up timing it and found it, and ended up saving time. Tangent over, and now it's time for the boss, and you just click Aber's Reckoning, and it dies. Shocker.
Aber, Prince of Peace next. And so it goes.
Oh wait, I completely forgot about one piece of equipment that we've been using this entire time. So a while ago we went to an area called the Ivory Ravine, and we picked up an item called the Giant's Club. And the Giant's Club increases all physical damage dealt by 30%, which is really, really useful. And since Throne is currently an Armsmaster, the main reason she's using Armsmaster is simply because it is a job that both gives good stat bonuses for her and lets her equip the Giant's Club, because it's a staff. And Throne normally cannot equip staffs. So you basically use the Giant's Club, like, any of the one thing that I'll mention is that any weapons that increase damage of a damage type in this game will work regardless of which weapon you're actually using for the attack. So you might think that the Giant's Club would only increase the damage done when you're using the staff to attack, but it actually increases all physical damage, regardless of if you're using a staff. So it increases our Aver's damage, it'll increase...
Stand aside or fight.
It'll increase Aver's damage, it'll increase HP Thief damage, it'll increase whatever damage Thorny uses, which is nice. But that was the Lightning Amulet that I mentioned, so we have one of the two, so now we just need one more Lightning Amulet, and that's all the defensive gear we'll need for... Well, I mean, we'll still need other defensive gear, but that's most of the defensive gear.
Time to clean up the filth. Ready?
And this next fight is another kind of early game fight, which means we don't actually need to switch it to night. You can just keep it in during the daytime, and then click HP Thief, and
Mike, you're too kind. I take what I want.
And I mentioned earlier in the run that the Fang of Ferocity was not going to be Throne's main accessory. The old run would use the Fang of Ferocity on Throne to get extra damage, but this new run doesn't actually need it. But we're going to get what we use instead of the Fang of Ferocity pretty soon. Well, I mean, the old route did use this item too, but it only used it much later on. And this item that we're going to get is the Finisher's Claws, which increases all the damage of all critical hits by 50%, which is very, very good. Critical hits normally do 1.25x damage, so you get a 25% damage boost if you crit, but this one multiplies that damage by another 1.5, so it makes it so that instead of doing 25% extra damage on a crit, you'll deal 87.5% extra damage on a crit, which is very, very good. This was used in the old route, but the issue with that in the old route was simply just that... what was it? Yeah, the issue in the old route was just simply you didn't
I'll do what I must.
you didn't have a build that had an 100% crit chance until much later on in the route. But since we have the Breaker's Blade, we already have a build that's an 100% crit chance. Crit chance is based on your crit and the enemy's speed. So basically, you can calculate crit chance based on the enemy's speed. If your crit is 200 higher than their speed, you always crit. So basically, we can look at which enemies we'll be fighting in this run and what their speed stats are. And so the highest we need in the run is we need 550 crit. We need 570.
Easy. All tidied up.
So we beat this guy, we beat this boss using another Aver's Reckoning, and then we can get the Finisher's Claws. We won't equip them quite yet because we actually went to that boss to skip some backtracking during this chapter, which is always nice. But when we start getting to final chapter bosses is when we're gonna need that extra oomph from the Finisher's Claws. And we're about to get to that now. If you're looking at the splits, Enshrouded King is our first final chapter boss after we get Aver's Reckoning. Also, one thing speaking of Aver's Reckoning, I guess I'll mention one of the main time saves of XP Augmentor is, and the reason it lets you save so much money. Also, I'm going to grab a nut here. This nut I frequently miss in practice. I'm glad I remember it now. But basically, the thing about Aver's Reckoning is that it costs a fair amount of JP to get, because in the old route, without the JP Augmentor, you'd still be about 1,000 to 2,000 short after doing the Assassin's fight. And since you were short JP, you would have to do some other chapters. And So one of the advantages of JP Augmentor is that it gives you Abers immediately, so you don't have to do those chapters. You can delay them till later when they'll be faster. And one of those 2 chapters, and is probably the main reason that JP Augmentor saves time, one of the 2 chapters that we were doing earlier requires you to spend a ton of money. And not having to spend that money lets you be a lot more aggressive with spending money earlier on in the run. But now it's time to go fight another boss. One quick tidbit I'll give about the story chapter is that to entreat those shoes, Agnia needs to be level 25. I think right now she's probably like level 30, so it's not an issue here. But in Agnia's single story, so if you're just trying to beat Agnia's story, which is the speedrun category, getting to level 25 there is pretty annoying. And it's kind of the main, is kind of like controls how that category gets routed.
Wait for me, Lila.
And again, this battle is nothing special. You just defend, Aber's Reckoning,
Too easy.
GG.
I take what I want.
So now we're actually going to go equip. We're actually going to equip not the JP Augmentor, the Finisher's Clause on her. So we equip Finisher's Clause here, and then we equip JP Augmentor to Temenos. So now, for the rest of the run, we'll have JP Augmentor. We'll still have JP Augmentor, rather. Like, Throne already had it, but now Temenos is the one to have it. And then we re-equipped Step Ahead on Hikari because we're going to need a baiting orb for these next few bosses, or at least we're going to need a baiting orb now. Not for all of the bosses, but for quite a few.
Cleaning time.
And one thing I will mention, so since we have 2 characters in the party that are level 80 or higher, like, and we have the Evil Ward passive, we can basically just run away from whatever encounter we want, which is massive. Like, and it will always work.
Let's play.
My time.
Which makes this section of the run just feel really nice, because you can just, run away from anything you want. So you don't have to fight anything, because we don't need XP or JP from fighting regular encounters. We'll get our XP and JP that we need from bosses. Or, from... We already have all the XP we need, basically, on some of the characters from just taking them to the Assassin's fight. So this is Hikari's final chapter. This is probably one of the more difficult final chapters casually, especially because it's sort of a boss rush of sorts. So, if you want to see this chapter get completely obliterated by massive damage Aber's Reckoning, you came to the right place. Also, in case you can't already tell, this video is very much not scripted, apart from, like, the intro. So, I apologize if I missed something, basically. But yeah, this fight, pretty standard stuff. We need a baiting orb on this one now, so we just use a baiting orb, defend, Aber's Reckoning.
Ready?
Prey must be.
Playtime, Aber. Prince of
Who's next? I take what I want.
In case you're disappointed that didn't hit the damage cap, don't worry, we'll hit the damage cap later. Or we'll hit the damage cap more later. And this fight is basically exactly the same as the last fight. Just defend, Aber's Reckoning,
My turn.
and
Prey must be.
baiting orb.
Playtime, Aber. Prince of
Who's next?
But this next part is probably my
take
favorite part of this
what I
entire
want.
chapter. And that is, so Hikari has to challenge an NPC in this chapter. And, For this challenge, it's with Hunter, you have to get creative with how you kill it. So basically, we gotta use a aggressive slash to break, use a baiting orb to remove the let us skip the cutscene to kill him, and then we just defeat him with Hienka. Hienka is a one of Hikari's latent powers skills, and it's a sword skill, hits twice, does very good damage. It actually does more total damage than the burn skill, the one that hits once, which is a little bit stupid.
Not this time.
So now we have to break this boss against this boss. This boss forces it to be day, so we can't just kill this boss immediately. We have to buff up a little bit with Lion Dance here, which gives us a physical attack buff, and we didn't quite hit the damage cap, but close enough. But yeah, back to that challenge with Hikari. Basically, we used Hienka to kill. The strat kind of has slightly changed for that fight. The old strat was we had to use a passive called Bolstering Break, which gave us an attack boost when you broke, but you don't actually need that. You can just, with Fang of Ferocity, that gives you all the damage you need. And now we're going to pick up the Battle-Tested Blade. This is probably the most prominent thing that gets unlocked after Hikari's chapter. Basically, it's a sword that has an identical effect to the Giant's Club. So it gives a 30% physical damage boost. And the two of them actually stack for 60%. But, you might be a little surprised, we don't actually equip the Battle-Tested Blade onto Throne right now. We actually equip it onto Hikari. And we also stole a shield called the Giant Shield. And the thing about that shield is we do not care that it actually, it has pretty good defensive stats. The only reason we want that shield is because it lowers speed. And I'll get into why that's important later. The lower Agnia's speed. So, the Battle-Tested Blade, we hurry, because Thorny doesn't need the extra damage yet. But the reason we equip it to Hikari is that Hikari does need the extra damage for another one of his challenge fights. Another one of the uses of his challenge path. You might remember in my last run, I had to use Merchant on one of the challenges, but with Battle-Tested Blade on Hikari, you don't need Merchant on that, which is nice. You can just kill them. So now we're heading to the Lost Isle. This is the place where we're going to get the Arcanist job. And Arcanist is going to get more use in this route compared to the old one, which is really cool. It still isn't going to get used the way you, as a casual player, would use it, but the fact that it does get used is still pretty cool. So we also grab an Ancient Curse Talisman. The old route we grabbed 2, and that's a very powerful endgame, a really powerful consumable item. I'll mention that later when it comes up. But, so, one of the things that we had to do in the old route is, in the old route we switched Throne's job to Inventor and used the catapult skill from Inventor to kill those guys. But the way we can do it now is just use Divine Dual Edge with Hikari. And Divine Dual Edge was the learned skill that you get from doing the challenge. You get it from his Chapter 3. And it's not the strongest AoE learned skill, but it's pretty strong. I want to say it's the third strongest, but that's besides the point. It's strong enough for what we needed, for what we needed to do. So now we have another fight, and this one's going to go pretty much the same way. This one actually we don't need to use Evading Orb on. You can just defend Aber's Reckoning.
My turn, not this time.
This is a two-phase fight, and the second phase will be the same as the first, but I will mention one thing about the second phase. And that is, it actually gives you a full latent power refill,
Not this time.
which is pretty rare in this game.
Who's next? All tidied up.
And multiple of the characters that come to this fight will actually use this latent power refill. It's very useful. Like, when I was originally routing this category, like, finding out, like, hey, wait, you get a full latent power refill on that. That's actually really useful. I can use that for something. So now we're going to go do a crossed path. Crossed path is another thing that needs to be done to unlock the final boss. And it's basically a two-character story. They're, in general, pretty cute. They're overall pretty short, but the... before I explain that, we're actually learning some more skills. So we're going to get the deal more damage passive on Hikari, because he'll need that. We're going to get the Cleric's Divine skill on Temenos, and the Dancer's Divine skill on Agnia. And I'll explain those when those become relevant. We also remove Step Ahead from both Throne and Hikari. And I'll explain that in like a few minutes. But anyway, back to cross paths. So the thing about cross paths is they involve two characters, and you need to have both of them in their party. You need to have both the characters in the party. They're kind of, they show the two characters kind of interacting, and they tell their own story, kind of thing. They're usually pretty short, and in the speedrun, they feature a bit little combat. Not too much combat, basically, so... But it's still something you have to route around, like... So this is the chapter right here. This is the second part of the Agnia Hikari cross path, and for this one, you need... Like, this is the one where you need Agnia level 35 to steal the required items. And also, there's some backtracking, which we can skip by going here, because we need to go here anyway. So, in Wellgrove, there's a few things for us. First, there's this guy, who has 2 nuts we can entreat. And also, we're going to go get the Dancer job. However, we're not just going to get 1 Dancer job, we're going to get 2. That's a mechanic in this game. You can actually get more than 1 license for a job. And if you have more than 1 license, you can actually equip the job on multiple characters at the same time. So, these additional licenses, you have a requirement. In Dancer's case, the requirement is that you've learned Dancer's Divine skill on 1 character, which is why we learned it on Agnia. If you're expecting us to actually use Agnia's Dancer skill, we actually aren't in this run, which is kind of funny, because it's actually a pretty good skill, but in this run it's just not needed for anything. The only reason we learn it is so that we can get 2 Dancer licenses, and not 1. And the reason we want 2 Dancer licenses is that on the final fight of the run, I think your odds of winning are probably somewhere around like 60 to 70% if you don't have 2 Dancer licenses. And if you lose on that fight, you're gonna lose multiple minutes, and it's a long run. I'd rather not gamble that much. So, yeah.
I shall be your opponent.
Ready?
Though I think your odds, it might actually be lower than that. I don't actually know what the odds are. I never actually calculated it, but I know the odds are not great. Like, it might even be like 50%. I don't actually know. Like, I think for the old road, if you skip the second Dancer license, it was 80%, but there's more things that can go wrong.
What to do?
But I did mention that we've removed Step Ahead from Throne and Hikari, and the reason for that is that it takes a second to display the text that says a step ahead at the beginning of the battle. So not having Step Ahead saves you a second on every single fight you get into. And now we're going to fight Yomi, and you can just... This is Shinji Manjigiri. It's a pretty strong sword skill that hits twice. It's also Hikari's second EX skill. And it's going to be pretty powerful. We're going to use it a lot during the endgame of this run, but we can also just use it there to immediately defeat Yomi in 1 turn. And we're going to entreat another nut at the end of this chapter. And this is another nut that I've missed a few times in practice. And now we're actually going to do something interesting that the other run did not do until much later, which is pick up Ochette. We're actually going to get Ochette earlier in this run compared to the other runs. And the reason for that is because Temenos and Ochette have a chapter in the same town. So if you do the Temenos one first, if you do the Temenos... Oh hey, another cave. It's another 2% chance. But if you do... but yeah, basically it just lets you save having to go to that town again by bringing Ochette along as you do that Temenos chapter. And that's another thing you can only do because of JP Augmentor, because JP Augmentor lets you get more JP, obviously, and that lets you get the Dancer Divine skill on Agnia earlier. In the old route, you actually have to keep Agnia in the party for longer so that she has enough JP to learn the Dancer Divine. So now we're going to progress through Ochette's story a little bit. So this chapter right here, we need to use Ochette's Provoke path action. Also, we picked Akala. We had to pick Ochette's Animal Companion, and we picked Akala. That is actually important. And I'll admit, basically, Akala does physical damage, and so Akala is a jackal and does physical damage. There's also Mahina, who's the owl, and does elemental damage.
Here we go.
But yeah, we can just win this. So Ochette's Provoke is kind of like Hikari's challenge, except you have to use beasts. You can't use your skills. However, you can also use items, so we're basically just going to throw soul stones at them to win. In the old run, there was a better strat for that one, but we just don't have the better strat yet, because we actually do catch a beast in that run, and then that beast is strong enough to just one-shot that fight, but unfortunately we can't quite do that anymore.
Hunt or be hunted.
My turn.
But yeah, we're able to pick up oh right, Animal Companions, that's what I was going to mention. So, I'll mention why, so, compared to Mahina, the owl, Akala has faster animations when you summon her, or summon him. And that saves a little bit of time. The other time save, I'll bring it up later. But I'd estimate it probably saves around 5 to 10 seconds by picking Akala. But unlike the last route only worked with Mahina, because since Akala does physical damage, she can actually miss. But if Ochette's high enough level, which she is in this run now, she won't miss. Also, I have no idea how I got caught on so many things during that.
I'll do what I must.
But since Ochette's higher level in this run, Akala won't miss. But in the old route, she was lower level, which means that Akala would miss, and you couldn't have that because you were using it on one of the last fights of the run. But the other thing about this run, with the Animal Companions though, is that you can actually pick Mahina and have the route still work. You just need to make one slight change, which I'll mention when it comes up. It just loses 5 to 10 seconds. It's not that big of a deal. So if this was a marathon run, you could have an incentive of, you can pick Mahina, or you could so, but both of them are options, so you can have does the chat want me to pick Mahina, or does the chat want me to pick Akala? Who knows? Anyway, now we're in Lost Seed, and there's a lot of useful items here. So there's a shop here. We can buy strengthening serums, which we'll need for the end of the game. We stole a Moon Eater there, which is a dagger that boosts wind damage and fire damage, but the wind damage is what matters. We stole a Forbidden Elixir, which is a third one of the other. We got 2 of them from stealing from those enemies in Oswald's Chapter 3. But Basically what a Forbidden Elixir does is when you use it, it sets the character that you use it on to 1 HP and fully heals their BP and their SP. Being at 1 HP is actually pretty useful with a item we'll be getting later. I'll mention that, of course, when it comes up. So that's why we want those. Then the other items we stole some rotten meat. So, rotten meat is a consumable that when you use it in battle, it poisons the enemy, the ally you use it on, but it also buffs their physical and elemental attack by 3 turns.
My turn.
I'm going to take a quick aside because right here there's a menu and I actually make a pretty major mistake here. They're not that major, but kind of major. So the jobs are correct. I put Armsmaster on Ochette and Arcanist on Throne. But I was not supposed to optimize Throne there. I clicked Optimize on her. I realized my mistake, which it removed her. I also forgot to unequip Hikari's gear. So you can see me fumbling around, like realizing like what is happening here. So I'm supposed to unequip your gear, I'm supposed to give the battle-tested blade only to Throne, and then optimize on Ochette. So the issue right now that I haven't realized is that I've unknowingly unequipped Throne's Giant's Club. And now, while it doesn't matter on this fight, it does matter on the next fight. So, I need to equip that Giant's Club. Will I? You'll see. And the reason for Arcanist Throne specifically is that it's the only staff job that's currently open. And the reason we're going Armsmaster on Ochette is because we can basically, those items that I've been mentioning that increase wind damage actually work on soul stones. So we'll be able to basically build Ochette to be able to use really powerful soul stones to save time during her provokes. So this chapter, if my mic was on for this run, because this is post commentary. If my mic was on for this run, you would just hear the cogs turning in my brain because I'm trying to realize, like, okay, since I screwed up that equipment menu, what went wrong? Is there anything that needs to be fixed? And it's around this point where I realize, wait a second, if you optimize Throne, it actually unequips the Giant's Club, because for whatever reason the game thinks that a makeshift staff is stronger than the Giant's Club. Don't ask. Now I realize it, and there we go. I equipped the Giant's Club, so all is good. I just probably lost about 15 to 20 seconds off that. Like, I think if I were to, this run has improvement. I think there's probably about, like, maybe 2 to 3 minutes of time save that I have here from just kind of mistakes. Maybe just 2 minutes, but I don't know. I feel like I might come back to beat this later, but for now, I think I'm mostly fine with this run. So that's that kind of thing. Anyway, now you complete Temenos' other chapter 3, because, again, chapter numbering is weird in this game. But now, you can actually, now, at this point, we're able to, do Ochette's story. So this is the reason you want to have Ochette early. If you have Ochette early, you can just immediately start doing this. So Ochette, for this story chapter, needs to capture what's called a buttermeat. So Ochette can turn, she can basically turn her beasts into food. And in this case, we need to basically make buttermeat jerky. Or air. So I think if I remember correctly, the buttermeat is a 30% chance to find it. You have a 30% chance to find it here. I want to say it takes me 6 tries to find it, which is pretty unlucky. But what can you do?
Prepare yourself.
Time to clean up the filth.
And there's the butter.
My turn.
Just something crazy thing. So Hikari almost kills the buttermeat in 1 hit. Keep in mind he has 0 gear on.
Ready?
which is kinda crazy. And for that little grinding session, we unequipped evasive maneuvers. Because, we were trying to get as many encounters as possible, and yeah, so we're going to prepare the Buttermeat here. The reason we do it at that point specifically is that you want to do it before you watch that cutscene. Because after you watch that cutscene, there's like a little cutscene when you if you prepare it. But if you've already prepared it before then, you're good. Yeah, you can use the aromatic jerky with Ochet's path action, which is Befriend, which lets Ochet get a little NPC follower, and she basically just, uses jerky to bribe someone, like, hey, come with me and I have food. So, now you have that NPC following us, and we can do the story chapter as normal.
I suggest you get out of my
Which is, the only time that little capture of the Buttermeat there is the only time that you need to catch a beast for the any percent. But that will not be the only time we catch a beast in this run. We'll catch another beast later. Now, thanks to the combined power of Battle Tested Blade and the Giant's Club, Thronate does so much damage with HP here that you just one-shot the boss. So, yeah, that's the fight. Very quick.
I'm hungry.
The one thing I will mention, I did mention like Ochet is going to have wind weapons to power up her soul stones. But this, of course, is not the only reason we're getting the wind weapons. If it was the only reason, we'd just skip them and then just use other strategies for the Ochet provoke. But we're gonna use them. We're gonna use those wind boosting weapons for endgame, anyways.
Ready?
So now we're just heading to Temenos' Chapter 4. And we're gonna do some grab some things from town, just like we have been in some other kind of late game towns we visited. Like, we grabbed a bunch of nuts. We're gonna grab some more items here. Mainly, we're going to grab a wind soulstone, which will be used with Ochet's wind gear. So that'll be how she kills a provoke. So we're going to grab a wind soulstone right here. The old run would actually grab a large nourishing nut from that beastling we just passed there. But we don't actually need that one anymore, which is nice. And then we grabbed an ancient circlet right there. So an ancient circlet is the second strongest elemental attack granting headgear in the game. It gives, if I remember correctly, it gives 55. There's a different armor piece called the Mermaid Circlet that gives 65. That one only gets accessible once you're midway through a certain side quest, or have completed said side quest, and that side quest is pretty out of the way. So for 10 elemental attack, that's just not worth.
Ready to pray?
What to do?
And this next boss is probably one of the funniest things about this. I'd say it's fairly funny. So Aver's Reckoning, of course, we're going to hit the damage cap with it, thanks to the combined power of both Battle Tested Blade and the Giant's Club. So we're going to hit 90. We're going to do 99,999 damage. Also, I just got stuck on the stairs there. What the heck was that? But we're going to do 99,999 damage. This next boss has 100,000 health, which means that if we just used Aver's Reckoning, the boss would have 1 health remaining. But fortunately, Ochet is our savior here. Since Ochet also has Step Ahead and doesn't really have anything to do on the first turn, you can just have Ochet you can just have her be the one to, you can basically just have her be the one to just deal the extra damage, so just have her do a bow attack. So right here, I'm gonna Baiting Orb with Hikari. I'm gonna use a bow attack on Jet.
Prey must be
Cleaning.
I'm gonna use Aber's Reckoning.
Too easy.
One tidbit about Aber's Reckoning
I
there
take what
is,
I want.
at this point in the run, your muscle memory for it has to change, because now you learn, after completing Throne's final chapter, you learn an EX skill on her called Disguise. It's a neat skill, but it's not going to be... Sorry. It's a neat skill, but it's not going to be used in this run. Also, shout out to me fumbling around with this menu, because I did it incorrectly, and now I did it correctly. There we go. But the issue with Disguise is that normally to select Aber's Reckoning, you would select Thief skills, and then press up, and that would get you to Aber's Reckoning. However, once you get Disguise, if you press up, you will get Disguise. And if you accidentally click Disguise, you will lose a lot of time.
So sorry.
Just another quick coerce there. So instead, what you can do is you can press right. So if you press right, you select Aber's Reckoning. So you just have to remember, once you get to the Caldina fight, okay, press right, not up. But if you remember that, you're fine. But yeah, now that we've completed Hikari and Ignia's story, we can switch, and we've done some progress on Ochet's story, so we can switch them out of the party. And now we're going to finish up all the things we need to do on Oswald and Porticio's stories. Well, Porticio's story is already done, but we haven't done the cross paths, and we haven't done Oswald's final chapter. And right now, we're actually going to steal from Ort here. He has some pretty good defensive gear that we'll need for endgame. Mainly a Swift Shield, which is a shield that boosts speed. We already have one of those, but we need another one. And we also need a Imperial Armor, which is an armor piece that boosts HP. So here we're just gonna do our the menu real quick to get prepared for Oswald's final chapter. So Throne will now be Dancer. This is actually a new thing compared to the route. And Tem would also go back to Hunter for Baiting Orb, but in the old route, Throne was Inventor, so she could use Catapult the Catapult skill to kill things. But now we use Dancer, so we can use Dagger Dance to kill things. And Dagger Dance is actually both faster animation-wise than Catapult, and it's also stronger, because I think Catapult has more base damage, but the issue with Catapult is that for whatever reason it can't crit. So Dagger Dance can crit, so I think Catapult's the only skill in the game that can't crit. Like, the only physical skill. Like, magic skills don't crit normally, but they can crit with critical scope, but whatever.
I like my arms. You know what to do.
So now we're gonna do some mugging. So for this chapter, we need to do mugs, and when you're mugging, you need what was I gonna say? Yeah, the fastest way to do mugs and speedruns is hired help. So we're just gonna spend a ton of money
I like
and
my
put
arms.
mugs. So this one's Beastlings.
You know what to do. I've gained valuable insight.
Right, and then the other, yeah. So then Oswald is Merchant simply for these mugs. Oswald also learns one Merchant skill because that unlocks the Hang Tough passive. The Hang Tough passive is very, very useful, and it's going to be important for the late game. And basically makes it so that if you've played Pokemon, it's kind of like Sturdy, but it's better than Sturdy. So basically, if you haven't played Pokemon, Sturdy basically... I should not explain what Sturdy does, I'll just explain Hang Tough. Hang Tough basically means if a character is not in critical health, so they're not, like, kneeling down, which means they're above 30% of their HP, they can survive any lethal hit on 1 HP instead of dying. So, it is massive. It's such a good survival Pokemon boost. Especially when fighting things that, like, don't, like, do multi-hit attacks. Like, if it's, like, one strong hit as opposed to several weak hits, Hang Tough is insanely good. And some of the bosses we'll be fighting will be one strong hit. And we're able to block that with Hang Tough. Though only 2 of the characters will actually need Hang Tough on. It's Oswald and Patricia. Those will be the 2 that'll be tanking in the end game.
My turn.
And if you've played the extra battles casually, you might be wondering how we can get away with only having 2 characters be the ones to take hits. But you'll see. It's some pretty clever stuff.
Let the experiment begin.
Cleaning time.
So, like, this chapter is the chapter that you'd normally do really early on to get money, and you'd have to spend to get JP, so you'd have to spend a ton of money, and that's why we save the money again with JP Augmentor. But we can also just do these a lot faster, because, like, previously you'd have to use hired help on these bosses in the previous route. Just Dagger Dance first,
Easy.
and then for the second one, you can just, for the boss, you can just defend Aber's Reckoning. Unfortunately, we don't quite have the power of Giants Club anymore, but we don't need it. It's fine. Like, you can use Debating Orb, defend,
Ready?
and then Aber's Reckoning.
So, Aber, Prince of who's next? I take what I want.
That is Oswald's story complete. So now all we need to do with Oswald and Particio is complete their cross path. So normally, oh right, I should probably mention how the cross paths get unlocked. So the first chapter of the cross path is unlocked when you complete, if I remember correctly, it's 1 story chapter with each of the characters. The second chapter of the cross path has, most of the time, the only unlock condition is beating both of the characters' final chapters, but sometimes there's other conditions as well. Like this one probably has the weirdest conditions. I don't exactly know it off the top of my head, but I know it has, like, there's several conditions that you can do to unlock it. Anyway, so we're gonna entreat some nuts, so we're getting Agnia in the party. Having Agnia in the party here is actually really, really useful, because there's multiple NPCs that we actually want to entreat items from, and the reason it has to be entreat is because they're only available at night. So during this chapter, we're going to buy the story items and then deliver them as normal. If you remember in the last run, this chapter is also when we pick up the Bodyguard's Vantage shield, which is less of a shield and more of just a stat stick, because it just gives a bunch of, it gives a physical attack, it gives crit, and it gives accuracy. But the thing is, it's a fairly slow side quest, so ideally you'd want to be able to skip it. So by getting extra nuts, we can actually skip the Bodyguard's Vantage, which is very nice. And now this is kind of the first showcase of Dagger Dance being powerful, because we don't actually need to Ignite here. Also, one thing I kind of glossed over is in that library we actually picked up our second Lightning Amulet, second and final one. And that's the main reason you want Agnia. In the old route, you'd have to bug for that. But in the new one, you can just entreat it, which is much faster.
Who's next? I take what I want.
So now we just, beat up the goons and then defeat the moneylender. And the best way to defeat the moneylender is just hired help. At least, in a speedrun. There was a while ago where I was, thinking, Could, like, there be some Oswald setup that was, like, somehow strong enough to win these without hired help? And I actually tried out some stuff, but yeah, I couldn't get anything to work, unfortunately. And now that's the end of Oswald and Patricio story, so we'll swap them out for Casti, and now we're bringing Temenos back. We want Temenos for that night buff, and Casti because we're going to start doing her story. We also need Ochette, but we want to keep Agnia in the party for this chapter. And the reason for that is there's an NPC that's night only in this town that gives a large fortifying nut. And fortifying nuts increase physical attack. And that nut is one of the things we'll need to compensate for not having the bodyguard's advantage. Another side effect of not having bodyguard's advantage is that Throne will be weaker, but it's still manageable. It doesn't lose that much time to have Throne be a bit weaker. It basically only loses time if you got perfect RNG, you could save time, but with the slightly stronger Throne, but Throne being as strong as she is in this run is fine. Like, she's basically as strong as she needs to be. So now we're going to head to Casti's the other Chapter 2 boss. The other one was the Sand Lion, but this is her other Chapter 2. And this boss is... We don't even need Abers for it, and we're also not going to use HP Thief, because it's a AoE. We can just use Dagger Dance on this fight, which is pretty crazy. Instead of doing Dagger Dance there, you can actually do Abers during the day, but it was timed that Dagger Dance is faster. Dagger Dance at night is faster than Abers during the day on that fight. Probably because Abers requires you to defend for it. And just to let you know, the glitching effect on your screen is normal. That is how that chapter works. Like, whenever Casti's flashback sequences happen, there's screen glitching, so there, for example, your screen is not broken. So we still need Ochette in the party, because she's Casti's cross-path partner, and we still have to complete her story as well. And this story just happens to be a perfect time to get Ochette into the party. So we can say farewell to Agnia, at least for a little bit. This chapter is almost entirely flashback, so basically it's just kind of walk around to get cutscenes. During this chapter, like, a small optimization is knowing exactly how many text boxes each of these NPCs have, so you know exactly how many times you have to press space so you don't accidentally talk to them again. I say press space as if that's what everyone uses to confirm. No, I think that's just me. I don't know if my keybinds are weird or normal. I think they're fairly reasonable, but you can get somewhat of an idea what they are from the button prompts you can see on screen if you're very astute. But I don't think it matters. Like, you can play on keyboard, you can play on controller. For speedruns for this game, like, I think there's advantages for both. Controller, of course, gives you access to joystick movement, so you have, like, you can actually move in more than 8 directions, which will save a bit of time. And keyboard is usually faster for menus because, you know, you have buttons to move up and down as opposed to having to use, like, a stick or D-pad.
Let's play.
Very well.
And that chapter's over, we can actually go and do Ochet's story. This is her second to last chapter. And this chapter also has a provoke, and this provoke is actually a fair bit more difficult than the other one. The other one we did way more overkill damage. We did a ton of overkill damage. This one we do not do overkill damage, but we can just use Shadow Soulstones to defeat it, and the Shadow Soulstones actually just come from Oswald's chapter, or chapter 5. Because on Oswald's final chapter, the ads for that fight, like those little golems we added, I think it was the golems. Yeah, the golems you have to defeat drop Shadow Soulstones.
Good job.
Then this boss will actually be one of the first bosses that we kill with a skill that is not Abers and is not HP Thief. It's the introduction of Surprise Attack. Surprise Attack is actually a really strong skill. Basically, it is a sword attack that gets an additional damage multiplier, gets an additional damage multiplier the earlier in the turn it comes. The crazy thing about it is that if you go first, it's almost as strong as Brand's Blade, which is the warrior's divine skill. Of course, Aber's Reckoning is stronger than Brand's Blade, but it's still cool that this basic thief skill actually does that much damage, if you get with the right conditions, of course. And now we're heading off to Ochet's final chapter, but before we do that, we're going to do some backtrap. We need to start Throne and Temenos' cross path, at least the second part of it. And we're going to start this chapter because, again, it's the backtracking thing again. So we're going to do part of the chapter that has backtracking in it, and then warp somewhere else to do something else, and then come back later. So now we're going to go do Ochet's final chapter, and this is where the second benefit of choosing Akala as your beast is comes into play. So, minor spoilers, skip probably 15 seconds if you haven't played this game and want to. I recommend it, but anyway. So the thing about it is, you fight the other beast the beast you didn't capture becomes the boss for this chapter, and the owl is weak to daggers and the jackal is not. So being weak to daggers lets you one-shot it, basically. So then for this part, it's funny. The whole Ochet's main plot point is the Night of the Scarlet Moon. So we have the Night of the Scarlet Moon right now, except it doesn't actually need to be night. So this is like the evening of the Scarlet Moon.
Easy. I take what I want. Ready when you are. My turn. Who's next? All tidied up.
But Dagger Dance is strong enough to just defeat all of these without needing the extra buffs from being at the night during the night, which is pretty useful. Because the buffs take time.
Easy. And so it goes.
So during this chapter, we are going to pick up another weapon. So we have two weapons that boost melee damage by 30% each. We're gonna get a third one, which is the Tornado Bow, which will accompany our Tornado Glaive and Moon Eater. The annoying thing about this chapter is that any battle you get during this section, you cannot run from it. So that's why I'm gonna kill this encounter.
Let's play.
I would have preferred to run, because I don't need XP from it, and JP from it, and I don't need anything. But I have to kill it, because you just can't. There's the tornado bow. I mentioned Ochette would need wind weapons to boost wind damage, and that one will go to Ochette, just not yet. So now we're going to go fight this boss, and because we chose Akala, we can one-shot it. If you don't choose Akala, you wouldn't one-shot it, but the way you'd actually get around it is what you would do is you'd use latent power with Throne Aid, and then just use HP Thief, and that'll defeat it. So I tried to simulate that here by using latent power, but I ended up finding out that Throne Aid's latent power only gets expended if you actually use both turns. So if you don't use the second turn, you actually get to keep latent. So I wanted to simulate what it would be like if you used latent there, but it didn't simulate anything, because it gave me the latent back. See, she still has it. But anyway, so Ochette gets the tornado bow. Now Casti is going to be the one to get all these magic nuts up. Which, if you've played this game, is a rather unorthodox choice. But it's gonna be a pretty cool experience. Casti will be one of our two main damage dealers for the endgame. The other one will be Hikari. And right here, we're going to steal some. We're going to steal a whimsical leaf, which will be used in Casti's concoct. That's also what the strengthening serums were for. Actually, thinking about it, I don't actually think I used the whimsical leaf in this run because I just didn't need to do it. But if you want. Basically, it makes one of the fights perfectly consistent instead of up to chance. So now here, I mentioned capturing a beast with Ochette, so we're actually going to capture a beast here. In the old run, we actually captured both of these beasts. In the old run, we captured both of these guys. Because this encounter is always these two frogs, but now we only need to capture this one. We just need to capture one frog. The original route, what you do in the old route is you capture them both, and then you prepare the other one to get 3 spicy jerky. So spicy jerky will buff elemental attack and physical attack for 3 turns. So if you remember, I was talking about rotten meat, and rotten meat also buffs physical and elemental attack for 3 turns. But it poisons you. It's also quicker to get. So it turns out getting the rotten meat is faster than having to just capturing a second frog. And there's another tidbit for why that's faster, but that'll come up later. Because the poison initially seems like it would be a deal breaker, but it's actually fine. And now we just got Alpione's Amulet. And I mentioned the forbidden elixirs that drop you to 1 health. And that is why you want them. Alpione's Amulet is an accessory that gives you a damage boost based on how low your HP is. If you're at 1 health, it gives basically a 3 times damage boost. There's a formula to it, but which I actually determined via some math, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need to know the formula. All you need to know, if you're at 1 HP, you get times 3 damage, which will be very useful. Anyway, so we're stealing another empowering necklace here. We got one earlier from a chest during Agnia's final chapter. And we're going to grab a Blessed Vestments here. Blessed Vestments, if you saw very briefly with that hat on it, it gives you plus 74 elemental attack, which is the best in the game for an armor piece. And considering we just gave Casti all of her magic nuts, you have a pretty good guess on who is getting that. Who is going to be the one who's going to be equipping that Blessed Vestments. But the Empowering Necklace gives 1000 HP, which is very good. since I mentioned we'll have characters be tanking hits, so Oswald will be the one to get those, because Oswald's HP stat is rather low, so you want those empowering necklaces, so he's tanky. But also, I do find it funny we got fire elementals. This is an encounter here. You can actually get fire elementals on the roof, which I think is even funnier, because it's literally raining up here, and you can just get fire elementals up here. Like, they are not doing great. Another thing that I haven't mentioned is that when we equipped the Tornado Bow to Ochette, we also equipped the Quick Cloak onto Throne, which boosts her speed. Now, of course, we lose the Butler's Tailcoat by equipping that, so we have less crit but more speed. However, we don't need the crit, because this boss has low enough speed where we still crit it anyway, without the Butler's Tailcoat.
Let's agree that never.
Who's next?
And that is the final character story boss. We still have the final story and cross paths, namely Ochette and Cassie's cross path. But we're wrapping up the story stuff.
I can feel them.
One thing you might have, if you remember from my last run, we bought an armor piece called Royal Guards Mail in this town, but in the new route we don't actually need them, which is quite nice. The Royal Guards Mail gives extra HP, so it's basically some defensive gear. Also, we're going to buy some stuff here, so we're going to buy Bluster Bloom, which is a concoct material for Casty, and also a Warding Leaf. And then we're going to sell items, basically sell some weapons we don't need anymore, and that gives us enough money for the end of the run. We actually did have some extra weapons that we could have sold, but didn't, but it just isn't. We don't need to sell everything we have, we just need to sell, like, the weapons we sold are the fastest to sell, and it gives enough money. So, just sell those. Also, this like is a level 16 chapter or something. So this boar is pathetically weak, and we just kill it with 3 dagger attacks. And that's the first part of the cross path. The second part of the cross path also has a fight. This one has, a more reasonable amount of HP. It's still quote unquote only 50k, so, which is around half the amount the normal final chapter has. So it still doesn't have much health, but it at least has more health than that. And here is the fight where we need the wind weapon on Ochette. With the wind weapons on her, you can basically just go use Wind Soul Stone here, deal like 6,000 damage, use another one, and it's dead. It's a little disappointing because, like, the old route would actually summon Glacius. Like, you can summon Ochette's bosses after you've beaten them. But so we don't summon Glacius anymore. But hey, there's other runs that do that, so who cares? We get to do crazy wind damage, which I think is cool. And then this boss just goes the same way as Glacius did, with Surprise Attack.
Ready when you are.
So you want Throne last, ideally, here, so you can defend with everyone instead of having attacks, but it's fine. You just Surprise Attack, and it's dead.
Heavy-footed, aren't you? And so it goes.
And then there's one last little errand we need to do before we can start the final story. And that is, I mean, this is the closest town to going to the final story, so we can just do it now. And that is get the battle-tested staff. But despite Throne being level 83, it's not an 100% chance to steal that. Also, one tidbit I'd like to mention there. With that steal, I did not fail a single path action this run. Every single steal, and every single scrutinize, and every single allure, all of them worked. And there's like a 2-second prompt that comes up when you fail a path action. It's like fail one of those specifically. So that's kind of cool. I saved 2 seconds by not failing a path action all run. And this battle will be the last battle where Throne is our main damage dealer. And by battle, I mean, like, this isn't a boss. It's literally just, like, some random trash mobs you can just kill with a dagger dance. But this is the final story. There's 2 bosses, some exploration, and then the final boss.
Who's next?
And before we go to the next boss, we need to do a massive job and equipment menu. So, first we're going to learn deal more damage on Casti, so she can break the damage cap. Then we're going to learn the lasting memory support skill on Casti. She's not going to be the only one to get that skill. We're going to learn boost start and hired help from Agnia. Lasting memory is a support skill that basically makes it so that any buffs you have will remain even after you die. Berticio learns the Cleric's Divine skill. Hikari becomes a scholar because he needs access to a staff. Oswald learns lasting memory and also the Seal of Immortality skill. And then Throne becomes a merchant. Now I go to equipment. Ochette loses all her gear, gets the Bow of Carnage because it boosts speed. I equip the Tornado Bow by accident. I realize it exactly right now. Hey, wait a minute, you should not have the Tornado Bow, you should have the Bow of Carnage. Bow of Carnage, that should be Tornado Bow. Casti gets Fang of Ferocity for extra boost damage, and Alpione's Amulet. Throne loses all her gear, gets a Swift Shield for speed, which I'll mention later. Then Berticio gets the Soldier Spear we got, which gives him a little bit of speed. Hikari gets like a full damage loadout with Champion Belt, Finisher's Claws, and Giant's Club, so he's got the Battle-Tested Blade too. Oswald gets his tank build with Empowering Necklaces and speed boosting gear. And then Throne gets our remaining tank gear. Now, we're going to give Casti peak performance for a bit, so we actually need to heal her up real quick. And so that is meant to be dealing more damage, not like Power Plus. I was meant to unequip Hikari's Step Ahead there, and I remember right now. So I unequip that. So this is the debut of Casti as a damage dealer. So this boss is weak to spears, and it's weak to axes. Temenos does have access to axes, but it's just better to use Living Power with him here. Now Casti will use Complete. And it's pretty strong. Since she has about like 950-ish elemental attack now, with all the magic nuts and the battle-tested staff that we gave her. So she's pretty strong. There actually are 2 quirks of Concoct, one of which won't be in this run, but one of them is. Basically, every other magic skill will automatically switch you to your highest elemental attack weapon. So you don't need to like select a weapon before you use it. Concoct is the exception. You need to manually select the weapon type you want to use before you concoct to actually get the stats from it. So every time I use Concoct to deal damage in this run, I need to switch to my staff so that I have the extra elemental attack from the battle-tested staff. So now we're going to go to the second boss. This this part of the run has been kind of reordered. Basically, we want to do the bosses as soon as we can, so then we can switch to basically minimize the number of party swaps we need. And I'll get to why a bit later when we actually do the party swap. But since we have two... Oh, right, yeah. One of the things I need to mention is that for this section of the run, you need to basically... Like, you need to light these flames, and to light the flames, you need to have a certain pair of characters in your party. This chapter also gives you the ability to switch characters whenever in and out of your party whenever you want. But essentially, if you need the right characters in the party, they're kind of hinted by these statues, but we kind of have the party set up such that we have two pairs of characters so that they can do... So you can light one flame, then you have the second pair of characters who can light the other flame, and then you switch to the other two pairs, and then you light the other two flames. And then there's another boss here. This one goes basically the same way as the last one, only this one has different weaknesses. Bow attacks, and axe attacks. I just used these also do axe. Switch to my staff, popped, 3 wind ingredients, and a strength. So the Strengthening Serum, in this case, for the damage one, it doubles the damage you get. And the wind ingredients obviously just give me more hits of wind damage. So I get 3 hits of wind damage and Strengthening Serum. So now I'm switching my party. So one of the advantages of doing... Not only do you only have to do one swap, but the other advantage of switching a party like this is that since I've unequipped Step Ahead from all of these characters, I get to save that second every time. I get to save a second from not having Step Ahead. I also get to save time from not having Throne and Temenos' passives go off, because they were in the other run.
Let the experiment begin.
I lose a little bit of time from Oswald having to study foe every time, but still fine. You still save that time from not having Step Ahead.
I'll do what I must. Here I come.
So this is kind of just a pretty chill point of the run
I shall be your opponent.
until the final boss, which we'll have to do 2 flames first. We will have to use some nuts and do a little bit more menuing before then. So the nuts we'll have to use, we'll actually be using them pretty soon. Because we still need to give Hikari all his damage nuts. We gave Cassidy all of hers, but we haven't given Hikari all of his. We also need to give Oswald a few nuts to increase his survivability, because he needs to tank hits and he has the lowest base HP in the game, and he's also not that high level in the run, so yeah, you kind of need to give him stuff. So I give all of my HP nuts to Oswald, I give all of my physical attack nuts to Hikari, I give Hikari a sharp nut, which increases accuracy, and I give Oswald a speed nut, a light nut, which increases his speed. So the whole point of the speed nut is basically... why am I blanking on this? Yeah, the point of the speed nut, I mentioned earlier that speed acts as defense against crits. So if your crit is 200 higher than their speed, you'll always get crit.
I shall be your opponent.
Because the formula is basically you take crit minus their speed. So you take your crit stat, you minus the target speed stat, and if the result, then you divide by 2, and that gives you the percentage chance that you'll get a crit. So if you want that chance to be 0, that means your speed and their crit have to be your speed has to be at least the same as their crit. So the final boss in this run has a pretty high crit stat of 275, and by giving Oswald that speed nut, you're able to get him to 275 speed. And that's the last flame, so it's time to go and do the final boss. Which, compared to last run, it's a new strat, because Casti actually gets to do this one. Because on the last run, I didn't mention, but in the old route, you would steal you'd have 2 forbidden elixirs, and this one you have 3. So we're actually going to use a third one on this fight here. Also, best music track in the game, and we get to hear it for a little bit because we have to do some menuing. Actually, it's my favorite. I wouldn't say probably not the best. Anyway, you switch party order, which for whatever reason I could not do there. Like I was just screwing that up. Then the only thing I need to do, I need to equip Life in the Shadows to get more XP and JP from this fight. I need to equip Lasting Memory onto Casti. Then I need to equip Lasting Memory and Step Ahead, Tishio. Boost Start, Regnia, and Step Ahead, the extra P, Step Ahead on Hikari, Lasting Memory, and Hang Tough on Oswald. So Casti, Partitio, and Oswald will now not lose their buffs when they die. I've given Step Ahead to more characters, and Agnia now has Boost Start. So she gets to start the battle with 2 BP instead of 1. So this first phase is the same. Basically, this is normally a 3-phase fight, but you can actually skip phase 2 by dealing enough damage to phase 1 and using evading. So we just use Shinju Monjigiri, and bada bing bada boom. I didn't really mention this earlier, but Hienka gives you an extra action at the end of the turn when you use it, so that's how I was able to get 2 actions with Hikari on that one turn. So, this is the introduction to Springy Boots strats. So Casti's going to defend, so she goes first. But Springy Boots is an Inventor skill that makes everyone act first. And if the entire party has this, the turn order gets fully determined by speed. So if you look at the turn order on the next turn, also check out this damage. And everyone's going to break here. I need to save a BP on Partitio. If you look at the turn order on the next turn, Partitio is first because he's the fastest, and and Casti is second. She's the second fastest. This is important because then you can use Pirate Help Thespians, which will turn that elemental attack drop the boss gave you into an elemental attack buff, and then I use Concoct to kill. What's worked about that fight is when you kill those hands, it blocks you out from using physical attacks, it blocks you out from using magic, or spells, and it blocks you out from using healing. But offensive Concoct is not considered magic by the game, despite it doing magic damage. There's actually a few skills like that. So, you can just get away around it like that. So now we learned Doter's Charity on Casti, and this is how we were able to skip the Apothecary job. Because now we can use Casti to cast it. No pun intended. So now we hire this Cleric, which will be needed for the extra battles, and now it's time to start the extra battles. This is what the entire run was leading up to. And there's some new strats, because we don't have Windy Refrain, and there's also just some strats to save time now too. So, instead of using Agnia for those first 2 fights, we're actually using Ochette as our 4th character. Because that lets you save an Ancient First Talisman. One note about these fights is that you actually get any loot, any items you use, you actually get back. Anyway, so we're going to have Throne break with Hired Help Beastlings. We're using Throne's Latent in conjunction with Reinforcing Jams, which refill BP and Latent, to basically just fuel herself. And then Casti can use Doter's Charity. Doter's Charity is a buff that makes items affect the entire party. So then Throne will use a Forbidden Elixir to drop the entire party to 1 HP and refill all of your BP. And since dropping the 1 HP has damage, Throne gets her Latent back. Partitio will use Aelfric's Blessing. Aelfric's Blessing is the Cleric's Divine skill, and it gives an extra action at the end of the turn. And now we get to see Concoct go truly crazy, because Cassie's at 1 HP. Keep in mind, the enemies here don't even have debuffed elemental defense. This damage can go even higher if I did that. And I can use Doters with Decay and Dragon's Essences to break 4 shields on hit. And that will let me break everything before they get to go, which lets me not need to refrain. And then Cassie can just go crazy again. The reason I need to debuff them is because Tressa buffs her attack buffs her defense whenever you break her. The other thing about that fight that I'll just quickly note is with certain turn orders you might need to use Cassie's Concoct to wipe their buffs, but it works no matter what turn order you get, basically. Yeah, I use Springy Boots to make Throne go first, which helps basically make the fight more consistent, and also make sure she actually can break enemies in time. This fight is really annoying because the third character from the top has a random chance to just get a free action at the end of the turn. That first turn is the one chance she gets to do so, and if she does it and kills someone, you just kind of lose. If she doesn't kill someone, it's recoverable, but if she kills someone, it's just... Fortunately, she didn't get an extra action, so everything is good. And I can just do off to kill. One thing that I will note real quick is that I really only have, like, all the concoct materials are, like, perfectly routed out, so if I forget to use latent power, when I need to, I can run out of concoct materials, which is not good. I think I had that happen in my practice run. Oh yeah, just concoct, finish these guys off. But yeah, these first two fights are pretty similar to one another, and these are the easier of the two. Even though all of them have like, you know, a total of like 2.4 million HP across them all, and it's the easier fight. Anyway, so we now put Hikari back in the party, and this next fight has 2 main parties. We also need to learn some skills, so Throne is going to get Cleric Divine instead of Partitio. Partitio is going to become a Dancer, learn Stimulate. Agnia becomes a Merchant again, and now we're ready to fight this boss. This boss is absurdly difficult. So it's V-Day, except now you have 4 tentacles that all start at the beginning of the fight, and when the tentacles die, they explode. I actually got the perfect turn order here. So if I didn't get the good turn order here, I would use Hienka to get an additional action to guarantee I act after they're all broken. So I can chip all the tentacles like this, because I really do not want them to explode yet. So I'm using Throne's Latent to make sure I have enough BP to get Aelfric's, because the boss just cleared my BP. I use Hienka to get an extra action. I can refill Hikari. I can reactivate Hikari's peak performance and refill his BP with a jam there. And now I use this Cleric. This Cleric will basically give me a shield that blocks 2 instances of damage. So I do that, and now I have 4 blocks. I have 4 stacks of damage block. And there's 4 tentacle explosions. So I take 0 damage from all of them. Thank God, because these tentacle explosions hit really hard, and you'll see that in second phase, because I won't be able to block them in those phases. So now we get to finally see the frog. So Ochette has a skill called Provoke Beasts, which lets her summon her beasts multiple times, and we can summon the frog there to just do a ton of shield damage. It hits twice with an axe. So now we're going to buff up Hikari. And these fights are set up so that no matter what turn order you get, you always win. So Hienka does pretty major damage there, and then all I just need is 1 Shinju Lonjigiri, and that's first phase down. So now the other party has to deal with the other phase. Now this is where things go. So this is, this first turn is interesting, because there's a lot of things that can happen. It doesn't get interesting here, because, there's a tentacle that has random turn order functions. So basically I'm going to use hired out beastlings here, and Oswald's one true magic skill to break all these tentacles. One true magic will always break a weakness, just like beastlings. And normally with Concoct here, I could use Whimsical Leaf, because that tentacle that randomly gets an action can actually like move party members back in the turn order, and if it moves the wrong party member back, you can just die. But Concoct lets you move the party member back up. So now we use Seal of Immortality with Oswald, which basically lets him tank, like, is a buff that lets him tank one hit, like any one hit. So now we buff up Casti, which, technically speaking, turn order-wise, you aren't always able to do. Like, because if Oswald gets hit by that random tentacle attack, you aren't always able to do, but you can just do it. But yeah, these tentacle explosions hit really hard. Sacred Shield lets Oswald take one, Hang Tough lets him take the third, and Seal of Immortality lets him take the fourth. So Oswald now takes all four, revives everyone. We get the good turn order here, so we can then set Casti to 1 HP again to activate Alpione's Amulet. Debuff the boss's elemental defense with a Ancient Curse Talisman, which is an AoE debuff for elemental defense. It also debuffs physical defense too, and evasion, but the evasion debuff doesn't matter. Buff up Casti's BP, and is the fight. Sometimes you have to delay to 5 turns there if you get bad luck. So now we're preparing for True V to the Wicked. Hardest fight in the game. So, put Agnia in the party, put partition. So, this is our party. And we need to equip the lightning amulets that I was mentioning earlier. So, Thunderstorm, Lightning, Unerring. I screw up the menu here a little bit too. So I equip Throny to Merchant. So this is neat. So Throny becomes Merchant. Agnia becomes Inventor again. What I was supposed to do is switch Hikari's job before I switch Temenos' job. Because if I switch Hikari's, because I just unequipped Hikari's Giant's Club, so now I have to re-equip it. I was supposed to do these in beta of a different one. But anyway, Oswald becomes Dancer, gets Stimulate. So now I need to go here and re-equip my Giant's Club. And I need to go to Equipment to do it, because I forgot. Hikari isn't in the party, and yeah, it's just annoying. And then support skills, again, this was not a well done menu, but I did do everything I needed to do. I Hang Tough on you and Boost Start on you, on Hikari, and Hang Tough is on Partition. I shouldn't just say you, because that's really vague. Anyway, this fight's really complicated, so hopefully I can get it all. So the first mechanic of this fight is that one of the hands will deflect all my elemental attacks, and the other will dodge and counter all my physical attacks. So I'm going to have Casti and Hikari be killing each of these. So I'm going to set Casti to 1 HP, buff Hikari to 10. This is normally where I'd use Windy Refrain, but I don't have that, so I have Throny's higher health guards to push the enemies back, and Commander to defend. That lets my entire party act before all the enemies. Then I can use Agnia. Throny even though that looks really close, Throny always lives there. Agnia will buff Casti, which will last for the first half or so of the fight. The other thing about these hands is that for this phase, the character who knocks out a hand will be taken out of the fight unless the boss is broken. So I have to kill one hand with Casti, she gets taken out, and I kill the other with Hikari, and he gets taken out. So the Lion Dance with Oswald actually isn't just useless. It has a point, it has a purpose, and it basically, on a later turn, it would guarantee that the boss would wipe my buffs instead of attacking me twice. And if the boss attacked me twice, I would die. But it doesn't actually happen this turn. But yeah, I'm going to use Hired Help 4 and Assassins to break this boss, and I'll use Stimulate to make sure Particio goes first, and 4 and Assassins combo of both hitting the boss for weakness and being able to heal me every time means I can basically just keep going until... But here I actually get the perfect turn order. Normally I'd have to wait another turn before I break, but since Particio goes first, I can just throw it a Dragon Distance with Oswald here and then break. On that turn, since I don't have the defensive buffs, the free defensive buffs anymore, that's the turn where I would have needed the boss to cleanse my buffs instead of attacking me twice, and that always happens. So now I'm going to jam Hikari to reactivate key performance, and refill BP. Cassidy does 400k real quick, and Hikari will Kienka, and Shinju. Then also Oswald heals Throne because Throne might be at low health from the fight. There's a chance about that. It's 50%. So now this next phase, the hands will come back, and there's now going to be an aura that makes me take damage and use SP every turn. So this is where I'm going to... There's an AI quirk I'm going to take advantage of for this phase. So I'm going to have Ochette debuff the boss. Use Springy Boots, which will make me go first the rest of the fight, and it'll also do that speed, that turn order speed thing, so the speeds among both of these parties are meticulously calculated, so I have the right turn orders when I need them. I break the other hand, now I switch back to the other party, so if Cassidy was last here, I would actually stimulate with other dancers to make her not be last. And basically what the AI quirk here is that when one party dies, it will immediately end the turn. So basically I'm taking advantage of the fact that I take damage every turn to intentionally have the entire party die. And the reason Cassidy can't go last is because I need that Decaying Dragon's Essence to be thrown before when the boss is actually able to participate. Throne is going to use another jam on herself because between the taking damage every turn and beating latent power, she just needs a lot of jams for this fight. Ochette can summon the frog, is kind of the MVP, this secret MVP of this run. Then Temenos can revive the other party using Cleric's Revive skill. And when you don't boost this is at 1 AP, it's perfect for outfielding its amulet build. So then I give BP with Kenya here. At this turn, there's a lot of different ways it can go. But you either need Ochette to Owl before that concoct, or you need to do a Shinju with Hikari, so I just, in this case I use the Shinju, and I need to switch parties back because I don't want the boss to cleanse my buffs on that party, and that was actually the first instance on this fight of why Lasting Memory is useful. It made sure Cassidy still had an elemental attack when doing that concoct, which was very useful. The second use is going to be here. So even though some of my party's going to die here, namely the top half, they will still have their buffs. So the lightning amulets ensure that Throne, Ochette, and Temenos will always be alive here. They're all I need to do this. Agnia was supposed to die because she gets one shot by that lightning, but she didn't. So I'm going to revive everyone with the Almighty Olive, summon a call a bunch of times with Ochette, and this is one of the times that Kala saves time because it hits faster animations. His Elemental Barrage of Temenos, which is Scholar skill, hits a bunch of times for random elements, but Temenos' latent makes it always break a shield regardless of what elements it hits. Then Throne is going to finish off the break. What's normally supposed to be done here is I use a Reinforcing Jam on Temenos to refill latent power and do another Mental Barrage. But I didn't need to do that because I got a high amount of hits on the Elemental Barrage. I almost miscounted the hits that I had. But since the speeds are perfect, so Particio goes first, I can then have Hikari break this with Aggressive Slash here. Then, now Oswald's next in the speed order, so I can give Ridden Elixir to Cassidy, then Cassidy can concoct, and just concoct again to kill this. And with that, that's the All Extra Battles speedrun on Octopath 2. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video.
My journey will not end.